Hey there, guys. This is Flamzeron, aka YouTube's Tosuke, and it's that time again. I was about to say that time of the year again, but this is sort of infrequent given what's been going on in this fandom. But there is also some news that I'll probably talk about a little bit since I'm kind of also infrequent with my video making. But anyway, so today I was going to review a little show that came out a while ago called Dragon Ball DAIMA. It's been out for a while, actually. I'm fairly late to the party. A couple of reasons why. One, I was procrastinating. I was taking too long. But also, I wanted to do something different with this one instead of what I did for the super stuff. I actually decided to, since the show in general was relatively short, I decided to watch it twice. One in the Japanese version originally as it came out, and then also the English dub. So I was waiting for that to come out, and this is also, I guess, somewhat timely too, because I think the Blu-ray is going to be the North American or the English dub of Blu-ray is going to be shipping soon. But there's a fair amount to talk about, so I guess we should probably get into it. I do have notes, as I am known to have in this. I don't know why the italicized key was on my notes. I probably shouldn't be telling you guys all this like behind the scenes stuff, but like I said, my channel, I kind of do it how I want. So I guess this is going to be probably more like a review and story recap, which that's typically how I've been doing my reviews as of late. I think I'm going to have that in the title, though, just because since I tend to focus on the story recap more. I do, like I said, I do have notes. I actually typed them as I watched the English dub. But which those who watched this show, both in English and in Japanese, or either or whatever language, or I guess I can't speak for the foreign other language versions, but for the English version in particular, we got some pretty cool stuff there. I'm trying to make the image in this one a little more interesting. Let me know if you can tell. I'll give you a brownie or something. I was going to say give you brownie points, but why have just the points for the brownie when you can have the whole brownie? But yeah, so this was the little, I don't want to say appetizer, because again, I'm talking sort of in regards to what we know now about where the series is headed. But this was sort of like the big show that everyone was kind of waiting on. Of course, it got even more, hype, or sought after rather, once Toriyama passed, unfortunately, because then it's like, okay, well, this is more than likely his last thing. Obviously, we know now he's worked on some other stuff too, but at the time, as far as we knew, this was going to be his last thing. So because of that, this felt a bit more special. And I'll go ahead and say there were a couple of moments when I watched this that kind of choked me up a little bit, both in the English or both in the Japanese and the English version. So, but we'll get to that as we go along. So I guess we'll start at the beginning, which this first episode was kind of interesting because normally these anime episodes are like 20 minutes long. This one ended up being like 40, and that was kind of a nice little treat. And the animation in general is like beautiful. Like usual, I'll kind of give my thoughts on the show itself as we go through the story and whatnot. But yeah, so it starts off actually outside of our usual cast. So we see two new characters. We've got a Goma and then a Supreme Kai looking guy named Degasu. They're essentially in like this weird, for lack of a better term, like a projection room or blue screen room even, where they're literally watching the Majin Buu arc of Dragon Ball Z with some nice animation stuff, and they're like, talking about what's going on, or they're observing it, and they're Goma in particular, I think, is points out that he's disappointed that Deborah got controlled by Babidi, kind of hinting that this is actually the demon realm, which I think they kind of hint on that in the promotional material. Yeah, and they're watching more to discover that both Deborah and Majin Buu ended up dying at the end. It was really more Babidi that they're focusing on. Bobby got defeated, Majin Buu got defeated, and Deborah got defeated, which essentially makes Goma the undisputed new ruler of the demon realm, because obviously Deborah is not around to take that throne, but also Majin Buu and Babidi can't be around to mess that up. But and so they're kind of relishing on that a little bit. But then another character comes in, Dr. Arinsu, who is essentially Degasu's sister, also a Supreme Kai looking chick. She comes in and she kind of teases, Goma about the people who actually defeated Majin Buu. Because while they were watching, there was like, whoa, these guys are really strong and stuff. Like, this is Earth. They're not supposed to be that strong. They're regular humans from their perspective. But they can fly and shoot energy blasts and stuff. How are they able to do that? Is it magic? But Arinsu is all like, if those guys decide they wanted to invade, the demon realm, they could go and do that. And they could beat you up. And then that kind of freaks out Goma. And of course, Degu's like, hey, dude, chill. But Goma's like, no. Hey, here's an idea. Let's go to their place and use their Dragon Balls to make a wish and to keep them from coming to us. And Degasu's all like, well, what kind of wish do you have in mind? And Goma's like, well, let's make them young again. Let's make them kids. So yeah, basically he really liked GT. A lot of people have made this comparison already, and I agree. This is very much like Toriyama's Dragon Ball GT in a way. I know there are a lot of people that like GT, and I have a fondness for it. Over the years, I've kind of looked at it, and I'm like, There's some, because a lot of my issues with Dragon Ball at this point, any issues that I do have is usually character related, to where I feel like characters are kind of being sort of like, milquetoast anime. I had a lot of issue with that with the anime version of the Tournament of Power arc. But yeah, so they decide to go to Earth for this because, as it turns out, the Demon Realm does have Dragon Balls. They only have 3. Kind of a callback from, or not really a callback, but it's similar to the granola stuff. But the difference there is that the Dragon Balls are guarded by these magical knights known as the Tamagami, that you have to fight and defeat in order to have the right to get the Dragon Balls. And they're kind of a pain to fight, so Goma's all like, hey, let's not do that because I'm a weak little peepee head. And let's go to Earth to use their Dragon Balls. So he has Degasu prepare a ship, and they look for some reason I have his name listed as Nemu, but I'm pretty sure it's Neva, who's an old Namekian, who he's going to play a pretty big role in the overall lore of this arc. This first episode has a lot of lore with it, and that's kind of where that's really where a lot of my issues with this show lie. Everything else I'm more or less cool with, besides just some things they're going to have to probably answer for later once we get to what they have planned in the future. But yeah, so they get Neva, who is this old Namekian guy, to go with them to do some work with the Dragon Balls. I forget why they chose to bring him with them, though, because I don't think they knew about the current situation of the Dragon Balls, because if you couldn't tell, this takes place after Majin Buu. So technically speaking, this is in between Majin Buu and Super, but before the end of Z, which takes place at the end of Super and before GT. So it's a weird sort of like in-between era. But that's their plan. They plan to go to, the human realm or Earth or whatever. And they do mention Universe 7, so that is sort of an interesting thing. They're keeping up with the stage that has been set with Dragon Ball Super. They have to use this thing called Sir Warp, which is like this mechanical like fish thing, where it's like, where do you want to go? I want to go here. What's your pin code? 2341457238495 or whatever. And it's like, okay, go in my mouth. And then that's how they teleport and stuff. That's how they go in between realms. But that brings us to Earth, where everyone is celebrating Trunks' birthday. I think my note says for some reason I wanted to say he's 9. I don't know why I don't just read my notes. But yeah, he's apparently 8. So this takes place basically a year after the Majin Buu stuff. And they're all having fun eating dinner, and Krillin points out that like, oh, you're pretty short, and Goku's like, yeah, Saiyans get a growth spurt when they're like 15 and whatnot. And then continue on with this like very modern Toriyama sense of explaining lore, because I actually think a lot of this like lore stuff came from Toriyama. Toriyama was very involved in this project, and I I don't think I've talked about Toriyama's death on the channel in a video before. If you've seen my post or if you've listened to the podcast, you can go there. You can kind of hear my thoughts there. And other channels like a Geekdom 101 has talked about this before. I personally think that the bulk of the entertainment industry knew that Toriyama was not going to be around for much longer. So I think there was a lot of planning and stuff and a lot of tributes and stuff that were maybe planned. Or maybe a lot of stuff planned in particular for the future of Dragon Ball, as we can see. And, I just watched a video about apparently Dragon Quest Day or whatever. So I don't know when this is going to go up. So it might be after, but I have also decided myself that, out of respect for Toriyama, even though I don't play the series that much, I will buy Dragon Quest 12 just by default, just out of respect for him, because that's probably the last Dragon Quest game he designed. But getting back on track, so Toriyama was pretty involved in this, and I think a lot of this, because I think with his thing, since he was focusing more on writing, I think he tried to kind of throw in more sort of like lore details here and there. In my opinion, I have no source on that whatsoever. That's just my entire opinion. So don't take that as as like a fact or whatever. That's just my opinion. But to kind of get back on point, which is also kind of proving my point, Goku notices Supreme Kai and Kibito over there. It's like, wait a minute, you guys used to be fused, but you're two different people. And then Supreme Kai's like, oh, well, we actually have you to thank for that, because, with the Vegito thing where you were inside Majin Buu and then you put down the barrier and then you split, apparently Majin Buu's stomach acid and gas and whatnot has like properties that can undo godly fusion with the Pataras. So we had Majin Buu swallow us so we could be separate again, which that kind of conflicts with Dragon Ball Super, because as we see in both Battle of Gods and because I think, is Kibito Kai in Battle of Gods? He's definitely in the Super version, but he's Kibito Kai in that one. Of course, obviously he splits into Supreme Kai and Kibito again during the Tournament of Destroyers arc, which then goes into Zamasu and whatnot. But here it's a little strange that they're already kind of already sort of setting that, so that I wonder how they're gonna mess with that. But it does also conflict with their method for defusing, because in Super, I think they use the Namekian Dragon Balls to, it's either the Namekian, I don't think they use the Super Dragon Balls, but they use the Dragon Balls to do it. And then here it's all like, oh yeah, the gases in Majin Buu help us come out. I had to actually re-record this little quick section because I was about to say it conflicts with the explanation they gave in Super, where Gowasu is saying for non-god people, the Patara fusion only lasts an hour. But like, well, so that's like, wait a minute. Supreme Kai and Kibito are gods. Unless you want to make some argument that because Kibito is the attendant of Supreme Kai, then he's maybe not a god. I don't know, but so it's this little section is just them kind of showing everyone doing their thing. And there's like a little brief moment where Goku and Vegeta are done eating. He's like, hey, Vegeta, you want to fight? And they're like, sure. And then they fight. And it's kind of cool to see that. We hear a little bit of like, the theme song, Jaka-Jan, which the music was great here as well, because it had sort of like that same, it did feel sort of like that sort of modern Dragon Ball like fusion rock jazz thing. No, not really. No, it was more. It sounded familiar of Dragon Ball music to me, but also it was like, different. It sounded more adventurous and stuff, and that's kind of what I liked about the show as well. It kind of felt more like a Dragon Ball RPG, like an RPG adventure, and that was kind of cool because it does kind of go back to the early days of Dragon Ball, where Goku and Bulma were looking for the Dragon Balls and all that. Because I love the fighting stuff. That's the main reason why I like Dragon Ball, is the martial arts, especially since it focuses on martial arts, especially with the tournaments and whatnot, and them fighting bad guys and whatnot. But the adventure stuff is always really cool too. Like, I would say maybe if martial arts and sort of like Asians, that sort of like, kung fu sort of Asian aesthetic is like my number one favorite sort of vibe medieval fantasy is probably my second favorite vibe or setting or whatever, and because of that, you could maybe say adventure is probably my second favorite genre over underneath martial arts and stuff. And then I guess third place would be contemporary stuff, and then like drama stuff, like dramedy stuff, like Gilmore Girls or whatever. But yeah, so that kind of shows where everyone is and whatnot. And then we kind of go back to Goma and them, and they make it to the lookout, and they confront Dende and Mr. Pope about the Dragon Balls, and like, hey, we want to use the Dragon Balls to make a wish, and Dende's like, fuck no, dude. He doesn't actually say it. He's all like, I'm not gonna let you use the Dragon Balls as what you want because I don't know you. But then Neva uses his powers, which is kind of interesting because this is sort of the first time we've seen this, to my recollection, where he actually reactivates the Dragon Balls and brings them here, or bring here as if they're like over. He brings them to the lookout, and because Degasu and Goma had the Dragon Boxes, they were able to get the password for summoning Shenron and all that. So they do that, and they summon Shenron, and then Goma's all like, hey, make all the people who killed Majin Buu into kids. Make them young again. And then Shenron's all like, well, that's kind of vague. How young are we talking? Oh, well, make them in first grade. Okay, well, what about all the ones who are already kids? Okay, we'll make them babies. And he's like, okay. And so he does it. So, yeah, everyone's turning into kids. And then here's another sort of lore thing that I think this is actually a missed opportunity, personally. He's like, okay, that's all the wishes you got, farewell. And Goma's like, well, wait a minute, I thought I got 3 wishes. And then Shenron's all like, oh, that's only reserved for my regulars. For people that I like, they get 3 wishes. For everyone else, they get 1. He's like, oh. So then he goes. I feel like that's a missed opportunity because it's just kind of weird, and also doesn't really make sense to. Or I guess it kind of does, because there are a few characters who use the Dragon Balls and like Super, like Frieza, and then they only used it. Well, no, yeah, because Frieza, Sorbet, and them used the Dragon Balls to try to bring Frieza back, and they got 3 wishes. So, what makes them special? And you could maybe argue that, like, well, maybe he saw Shu, Mai, and Pilaf, and he's like, oh yeah, I know those guys because they wished me one before, so I'm just gonna give you guys another wish. And they seem to kind of go in between it's 3 wishes and 2 wishes, because I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be 2 wishes. I might be getting my facts confused, but what I would have done is that because Neva revived the Dragon Balls prematurely, I would be like, oh, I only have enough energy for 1 wish, so that's all you get. I can't do anything else. Because I think that would make more sense. Because if you're, it's like you're charging your phone or whatever from like 0 after it falls asleep, and it's able to turn back on, and you unplug it and it's at 10%. Well, that's only going to last for like however long 10% lasts for you. Like, it's not going to be the same thing. Where's my phone at right now? I'm just looking. It is low. 28%. Okay, cool. You didn't need to know that, but I told you anyway. But yeah, so that's pretty much the end of that first episode, because then Goma and Degasu, they end up leaving, but they decide to kidnap Dende and take him with them, since he's like a little baby, and think, well, we could use him as like a hostage, and also prevents them from using the Dragon Balls again, because obviously when he grows old again, like, he'll be like, oh, I can do the Dragon Balls, or whatever. So yeah, everyone turns into kids, and that brings us to episode 2, which is them kind of reacting to them all being younger, and they're all sharp. But Krillin, he kind of notes that it's not necessarily that they're like younger. It's more like they're shorter, because while they're physically aged, they're younger. They still have their minds of where they're currently at. So it's more like they grew small, because they more or less feel the same. As Supreme Kai and Kibito kind of have a bad sense of things, and of course Goku and Vegeta and Piccolo and all of them, they're all little kids. And there's like a little moment where like Mr. Satan shows them, he's like, hey, you gotta do something. It's like, well, who are you? Hey, I'm Mr. Satan. And of course it happens to Master Roshi as well. It's like, I'm Master Roshi, because they all look different. It's kind of funny. The general designs of everyone's kind of interesting too. Like I said, the animations are really good. Goku, this is probably my favorite Goku design overall, besides just like the classic sort of like orange, like the Cell Saga, sort of like orange and blue gi without the symbols. I always like the symbolless design for Goku because I kind of like sort of like that vibe of like, because he's sort of like an intermediate martial artist, he doesn't necessarily have a master, even though technically King Kai is his master. But I kind of like that sort of like a subtle sort of narrative to his design. I don't think Toriyama was intending that, but if anything, he was like, yeah, I'm getting tired of drawing Goku's symbol. But here he looks kind of cool because it's sort of like a weird mixture of like his GT or like end of Z look with also his typical orange and blue outfit, and then Piccolo has the yellow sort of like muscle color that he had in the manga and in Superhero. Then probably the other big one, I think, as far as trying to be close, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to be closer to the manga. It's really in Kibito and Supreme Kai's colors, because their outfits are more colored like how they are in the manga, instead of that like teal blue kind of look. It's more like it almost kind of looks like he's cosplaying Zamasu a little bit, except he's not, because even Zamasu had sort of like darker colors. But besides that, everyone else kind of looks about how they would look. Bulma, she's got her design, which is cool. You like her pink sweater with the Capsule Corp necklace. But Supreme Kai and Goku and Piccolo and Kibito, they decide to go up to the lookout, and that's where Mr. Popo gives them like the lowdown of what's going on. And it's like, yeah, there's this guy named Goma and Degasu, and they fucked shit up. And it's like, what? Degasu and Goma? I've heard of those names before. And of course, Supreme Kai, knows him because it turns out that Degasu is actually Supreme Kai's younger brother, which also means that Dr. Aransu is his, I think, it's either older or younger sister, but they're related. We do get a little bit more lore on Supreme Kai, including one particular thing that I do not like, which is kind of dumb, but I'm going to get to that later on. And then they also mentioned Neva, which goes like, Neva, the legendary Namekian, which that I also didn't really like that much because, again, it was like a lore thing, but given that for all intents and purposes, Piccolo is a Namekian raised on Earth, much like how Goku was a Saiyan raised on Earth, I felt like Piccolo shouldn't know that much about Namekian history. I don't know, maybe he studied in his spare time, and since he merged with Kami, maybe he got that same information. Of course, also with Nail, maybe Nail knew something. But they also kind of reveal more or less here that basically any race that has pointy ears is a descendant of the demon realm. Like, they all migrated from the demon realm to like the non-demon realm, which is an interesting piece of lore. I don't know how I feel about the Namekians coming from the demon realm. I mean, it makes sense, and it is kind of like a nice little throwback to Demon King Piccolo in a way, because back then we just thought he was a literal demon, but then it's like, oh no, he's a green alien guy. But so they basically kind of do that stuff, and Goku wants to rescue Dende, and Supreme Kai suggests that Kibito goes back to the Supreme Kai world and get his old ship from when Supreme Kai migrated from the demon realm to the Earth realm. Here I am thinking about Mortal Kombat. And so he goes and gets it, but it turns out that it's not really working that well. So Goku suggests, hey, let's get Bulma to try and get stuff. And he tries to fly, but he's kind of struggling keeping up with his body, and Piccolo kind of chastises him for it, but he's like, well, you try it. It's like he ends up crashing to a tree and getting himself a nosebleed. But Kibito ends up teleporting and getting Bulma, as well as Vegeta. And she says she can fix it, but it's going to take like 10 days. So that's kind of more or less their plan. This is apparently 2 days later. Again, I'm going off of my notes in terms of like finer details. There's some stuff I don't really remember. I do remember the general gist of the whole story. In fact, I kind of jumped a little bit in and out, but what I was trying to kind of get to earlier with sort of like this being sort of like a love letter from Toriyama, they actually also brought in like the big people. I haven't really mentioned the theme song yet, or I mentioned it briefly, Jakajana. That was actually produced by Zed, who is a European musician, which I thought was really cool, because you don't really see a lot of you don't really see that very often, where you get like foreign collaborators coming in to like work on stuff like this. It doesn't really happen that much, and with Dragon Ball, it seems like we're seeing it a lot more. Like for the 40th anniversary stuff, they actually got Hans Zimmer to do like the theme song. And sure, it was probably just like his company or whatever, and it was like a small little thing, but it was still really cool that they actually got him to participate in that. It was actually really humbling and kind of showed just how big Dragon Ball is. That like they're bringing in all these different players, and even from like the production side with the Japanese version, they got Nakatsuru coming back, who is like sort of like the key player of not really the key player. There are some people like other people like Minoru Maeda and Ebiwasa, I think his name is, who I think went on to do One Piece. I don't think they got Ebiwasa or whatever, but they got a bunch of people. And Nakatsuru was known for, from what I understand, he was one of the artists who was known for being able to replicate Toriyama's style pretty well. Toyotaro didn't have any involvement in this, which is interesting considering he's the one that Toriyama picked as his successor. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see kind of where we're at. But generally speaking, I support Toyotaro because he's apparently the new helm of Dragon Ball at this point, or at least for the manga or whatever. I know there was like a whole thing talking about like who owns Dragon Ball, what are they playing with, Akio Ioku and Capsule Corporation Japan and all that, and just all this Shueisha and all that. I don't even have all the details straight myself, but it's more or less calmed down now. But either way, what I'm basically trying to say is I'm here to see kind of what the new team is going to do. So this was kind of nice to see from Toriyama one last time, besides, I guess, some smaller stuff that we're seeing in other supplementary stuff. But getting back on track, while they're waiting for Bulma to fix the machine, they're trying to kind of discuss their plan and what they're doing. And Goku's trying to like shadow train, but he's not really getting his distance down very well. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to go get my power pole. So he goes to Korra and he's all like, hey, I want to get my power pole. And it's like, do you have it? I left it on top when I went to, Kami's lookout for the very first time. And Korra's like, no, it's not here no more. Maybe go to Master Roshi's place. I think I gave it to him. He's like, okay, cool, no problem. So he goes to Master Roshi's place and it's like, hey, do you have my power pole? It's like, I don't know. Turns out he actually did have the power pole. He was just using it to, dry his laundry. So Goku's back with the power pole, and that's kind of cool to see. Because that's another thing I like seeing is martial arts using weapons. Obviously, we have that with Trunks and the sword and all that, but it's kind of cool to see here. And because it comes back during nighttime, and Bulma's more or less, fixing up the machine, the spaceship, and they order Chinese. Bulma tells Kibito to go pick it up, so he's basically like a friggin' DoorDash guy. And they give a little bit more lore, mainly coming from Piccolo and Supreme Kai talking about their experiences with the Demon Realm, which to their credit, they do have Piccolo say like, I don't know much about it because I was born, on here, so I don't have any memories of it. Supreme Kai is really the only one who has like actual, I guess maybe him and Kibito have like memories of what things were like back then. And they're just kind of talking about sort of why the Namekians ended up going to Earth, and it's like they didn't really like the sort of situation. They kind of wanted more freedom and whatnot. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but while they're talking and eating dinner, they feel an energy coming down. It's like a little plane thingy, and they come down, and the guy who comes out is a new character, Glorio, which the Japanese version, I think it's Koki Uchiyama, who I currently know now as Disaster from Kamen Rider Saber. But I think he's also I was gonna say he's Shadow the Hedgehog. I think I'd have to look back and say I don't think that's true, but in English it's and I don't know how to pronounce his name probably. I think it's Aaron Dismuke. I think who this was kind of cool for me. Besides the other fact that they got Stephanie Nadonli back for Goku, which was awesome. But for Gloria, I thought that was kind of cool that they got Aaron because he grew up as like a Funimation voice actor because his first role was Alphonse in Full Metal Alchemist when he was like a little kid. Then like he kept doing other stuff here and there, Then he started getting like more prolific and stuff, and it's just kind of cool to sort of hear him, you know, play a character in Dragon Ball. Both the English and the Japanese versions have some pretty cool voice actors. Like I said, Stephanie Nadolny came back as Kid Goku, and she's been playing this version of Goku in all like the games and stuff. So that's actually really cool that she came back, and it was really cool to hear her come back and voice a more Kaiified version of Kid Goku, I guess, because I know once we started doing like the later games in Kai and all that, they started trying to be more closer to the Japanese. So it was, and she was already kind of used to that as well. I think because obviously by the time they had gotten to Kai, like I think her last game was Raging Blast 1, I believe. So she already had technically Ultimate Tenkaichi because she was in that as well. Because they were kept like flip flopping between the two versions, and like, okay, cool. But and then for the younger versions, slight missed opportunity because they did recast Krillin, both in the English and the Japanese. In fact, I think that's the reason why it's different in the English version, because the Japanese version uses a different actress. Krillin's a typical Japanese actress is Mayumi Tanaka, who's Luffy in One Piece, and I don't know if she just wasn't available at that time, but everyone else was recast with the newer actors. I don't know how it was in the Japanese version. Apparently, according to Stephanie, for the English stuff, they got a lot of like younger sort of like student actors, which that was cool. They all sounded really cool. They sounded really cool. I was trying to say good and cool at the same time. So it was kind of nice to hear. And in the Japanese version, they were kind of matching the Japanese voices pretty handily as well. So that was kind of cool to hear. We also get to hear the new Yamcha briefly because of that whole thing. I think he's being played by Ryota Suzuki, who I think was in Dr. Stone. He did a good job of matching Toru Furuya. I don't want to talk too much about what's going on there because that's a bit of a thing. Same technically with someone else, but it's cool to hear. And there's some other characters there's one character in particular who probably is my favorite out of the new characters, who he was played by a character that I've wanted to see in Dragon Ball for a while, and apparently he's wanted to be in Dragon Ball for a while. I'll get to him when we get to him. But anyway, Glorio shows up and he's like, "Hey, you're Goku, right?" "Yeah, dog, I'm Goku. What you do? I need your help. I need you to go to the demon world with me and kick the ever-loving shit out of Goma." And he's like, "Yeah, dog, let's do it." And then Supreme's like, "Well, hold on a minute. I'm going to go with you because this guy's kind of weird and he's doing things to my body." No, I'm just kidding. So Goku and Supreme Kai and Glorio end up going. Vegeta wants to go too, but he's like, "Hey, my plane can only fit like a few people." And Vegeta's like, "Oh, no. And he's like, "Well, just wait until Bulma's ship is done and then we'll catch up." So they end up leaving them behind. So Vegeta, Piccolo, and Bulma, and I guess Kibito. I think Kibito ends up staying. I think he ends up staying in the regular world. Yeah, basically Goku, Glorio, and Supreme Kai, or SK as I have written down in my notes, they fly off. So, and like I said, they're throwing a lot of lore at us, and this isn't going to be the only instance where they do that. I also recently finished the Kakarot DLC for Daima, and that sort of did some things here and there. I mean, it was largely the same. I don't want to talk too much about it, but and I'm trying to kind of keep this strictly to the anime version. But yeah, basically, I think it's episode 3. They are flying through space. They get to Sir Warp, and it's all like, "Hey, wait a minute, you got humans, you got Earthlings with you." No. Supreme Kai uses his friggin' his powers to make Goku's ears turn into elf ears, so he looks like an elf guy. Goku's a bit it's kind of funny. It's like, "You're a giant goldfish." It's like, "Goku, you can't say it." It's like, "Oh yeah, sorry that I called you a big goldfish." "No, you can't say that out loud either." It's kind of fun. I don't want to say Goku's unhinged, but Goku is definitely, they definitely play up the more silly, stupid side of him, and they do it differently than in Super, because he's still pretty thoughtful and stuff, but it's more like I don't know. I guess it's literally like he's a child. One of my favorite scenes is going to be coming up later on, but yeah, so they get through the demon realm, and they kind of talk about how, like, there's the third demon realm, the second demon realm, and the first demon realm. They only have clearance right now for the third, so they're in the third. It was like this like wastelandy area, and they have to basically walk the rest of the way. Supreme Kai tends to kind of question Glorio a lot, and so he kind of has his suspicions of Glorio. It ends up being somewhat right, even though he kind of makes a good call at the end. But Glorio kind of basically tries to leave it like, yeah, it's my job to basically do this shit. I'm basically a mercenary. It's like, oh, okay, well, you seem pretty knowledgeable about things, and you act like you're kind of from the first, where it's like, yeah, I go between the first and the third. What about the second? I'll go the fucking second one. But they kind of take a breather, and they note, Goku in particular notes that the air is kind of weird and thick, and Glorio's like, yeah, that's kind of how things are over here. Some bandits try to attack him, but they're kind of slow and weak, whereas Glorio, he moves fast, and he pulls out his like little blaster to dissuade him and stuff, so they kind of show like, hey, he can do some stuff. He actually can kind of do some cool stuff. If you've played any of the games, you can kind of see that he's got like some cool lightning powers and stuff. One of my favorite episodes involves his fight with Goku, which I spoiled it now, but we'll continue as we continue the story. I feel like I'm forgetting kind of how to talk. But so they decide to take a break at a hotel, and their plan is to kind of return to the main third. I say return to the third Demon Realm's king and talk to him. I think I put in quotes because but it's kind of funny. They for one thing, Goku, he passes gas on the trips, like. There's like this like smells, like, yeah, there's a smell here, and then Goku's like, yeah, you could really cut the cheese here, no one would know, but like they get some like turbulence thing, and then it causes Goku to pass gas, and goes like, it smells worse now. But the story generally feels like the early stages of a JRPG, which is it's fun. It was kind of nice to see, because that's probably my dream Dragon Ball game, is something kind of like the Full Metal Alchemist PS2 games, or Uzumaki Chronicles 2 for Naruto, where it's like you take these characters but you put them in an original sort of like action RPG or action JRPG story that obviously that fits within their realm, but like it's very JRPG heavy, and we kind of got that with this, and we may be getting this for a game that's coming out, but I'll talk about that near the end, I guess. They check into the hotel, and Goku's hungry. He's like, well, there's a restaurant, like a bar by there. And it's kind of funny, like, Gloria's all like, hey, is it okay if you get 2 cheeseburgers? And Goku's like, well, I did eat a little bit of dinner, so I'm probably should hold back a little bit, so I'll do 8 cheeseburgers. Like, and we're talking like Whopper, cheeseburger, like double Whopper burgers. They're like huge ass like restaurant burgers. We're not talking like McDonald's double cheeseburgers or Dave Jr.'s or whatever. Because like, yeah, if you're eating 8 of those, that's actually that's still a lot, but it's doable, I think. But then again, I'm a strange ranger, and some like thugs there, they look at Goku like, wait a minute, you don't look like you're from the demon realms, like, fuck you. And then they try to jump him, but they fight and they win, and then they end up going to bed. But when they wake up, they realize that the plane has gone missing, because it turns out the thugs that they beat up decided to steal their fucking plane. They even leave like a little note, like fuck you or something. It doesn't literally say fuck you. That's one thing I guess I could go ahead and note now. I noticed this both in the English and in the Japanese version. The kid versions don't really swear that much. They have Vegeta say blast a lot. And I think they have Goku say darn and dang and stuff. And the adults, they cuss, and then like when, spoiler alert, they turn back into adults, they have Vegeta say damn it all. Because this is a very modern Dragon Ball dub where, they will cuss if they need to. They try to stay as close to the Japanese as possible and all that. But, so they end up having to, go on foot and figure out what they're going to do next, try to find another plane. Overall, the exposition about the demon realm is mostly natural, and it's kind of, helpful to know. I mainly note that because, again, that first episode and a little bit into the second one, it seemed like they were throwing a lot at you. And this is going to kind of come into play later on once we get to the second demon realm. This is where I'm going to take a little bit of issue as well, because it kind of conflicts with what we know about Super. But then again, it's it's whatever. But they end up going to another shop where they stop to have some din or lunch or whatever, and they get some that's where they introduce these revived bugs, and like the yow bugs and the I think it's called the burr bugs, like different bugs, and it's a little bit of a red herring because they show like, oh, this is a bug where you break it in half and you give one to your buddy and you eat one here yourself, and then you merge into one being. It's like the Pataras or whatever. It doesn't really go anywhere, but Gloria asks the shopkeeper about borrowing a plane, and they don't have any, but they say, like, well, you can have this like flying pedal thing. And he tries to kind of pretend to be deaf too. There's like a little bit about him not being able to hear so good until Gloria mentions that he'll have to find something. I was like, oh no. He has diarrhea. Look, Giorgio, it's a diarrhea. It's Glorio. That's another thing too. Goku mispronounces Glorio's name all the time, both in the English and the Japanese version. Looking at it now, what we know about Glorio's character and what I understand of his character, it actually kind of makes sense that he would do that because it's kind of like a confidence thing. He's like, no, because he's insecure a little bit. And that little thing kind of plays into one of my favorite scenes, which we're not at yet. But so they find this little sky seed thing where you basically have to like launch yourself on this like giant like celery thing or whatever. Like it's like a giant like flower petal thing, and they go like across, and Goku gets excited about wanting to fight the Tamagami as well while they're talking, but because Gloria's like, yeah, we're gonna have to fight the Tamagami if you want the Dragon Balls, because they're ultimately trying to rescue Dende, but then also turn themselves back into adults, and I guess they don't really want to wait, like however long it's gonna take. Thinking about it, since the Dragon Balls were used prematurely, I wonder if that increases the time. So instead of like, I think it was like maybe 6 months they would have had to wait. Maybe it's like a year and 6 months that they would have to wait. So then it's like they have to gain like a whole another year of like experience. So I guess they could use the Namekian Dragon Balls or something. Or if they knew about Super, they could use the Super Dragon Ball. But they get to the town, and they see that members of Goma's like squad force, the gendarmerie, I think that's what they're called. They're taking offerings of gold forcibly from the people there, but if they don't have enough, they use this machine to take their like literal years off their life. And it gets pretty it starts to get kind of rough because this one guy is all like, please don't take my life, me. And he's like, I'm gonna take your life, and Goku's about to jump in to like save the day, but then this other person with like a mask on, I know I kind of gave it, you can probably tell that it's a female, but she comes in and she's like using like these little gas bomby things or whatever to stop them with a wasabi bomb, and it doesn't really work, and she's about to get captured, but Goku comes in and saves them, saves her and stuff, and they fight off the guards and stuff. So basically Goku is a criminal. I think Gloria has to help a little bit too, or it's either just Goku or it's Goku and Gloria. I don't think Supreme Kai doesn't really do much. He actually doesn't even really fight until near the end, to my recollection. He might do like some like little maneuvers, like weave and stuff, and then like do his like little God pulse thing that he does sometimes. But they end up escaping, and then the masked person ends up following them, takes off her mask, and it's like, hey, it's Pansy from the promo images. You're basically Pan in Glorio's trunks from GT. Not really, but yeah, they introduce Pansy, and she's asking them a bunch of questions about why they're here, and Gloria's like, shut the fuck up. Stupid fucking bitch. And then he takes a dump on her, and then she goes into a coma because it turns out that Glorio's poop is like just this weird acidic poop. But for some reason, Goku decides to eat it, and it makes him more powerful, and he goes Super Saiyan 7. No. But he basically tells Pansy off, which it then also cuts to a scene where they show this like May woman reading to Dende, and I think either Degasu or Goma comes and is like, read it with gusto, which it's kind of funny, sort of thinking about how like, okay, this little baby is hostage, but they're treating him like he's like a regular person. Like, it's kind of funny, like if like Goku's like, yeah, fuck Dende, and they just stay home. and they kind of naturally age, and then Dende gets older. But like it turns out Dende, like they just treat him like a regular dude. It could be kind of funny. Based on when they show Goten and Trunks as babies, they do like this internal voice thing where they're talking in their regular voices, at least their regular voices for the time. So it's kind of implied that even though they're babies, they low-key have the minds of where they're at. So I don't know if that, I don't know what exactly, thinking about it, actually doesn't really make sense that Dende would be a baby, but Goten and Trunks would be babies as well, because I think Dende's older than Goten and Trunks, isn't he? Because at this point, he's big enough to have Justin Cook voicing him. And the Japanese version is Aya Hirano, I believe, who's playing a Dende. And they have her play Dende in the Japanese version as well. She came in for Kai. But for Daima, or the English dub of Daima, it's still Justin Cook playing Dende. So as far as I understand, he's about at least whatever equivalent of Gohan's age he is. Because, those who remember watching Dragon Ball know that, Piccolo's technically like 15 or whatever. Even though he's got like the body and the age of like a 30-year-old. Or the body and the mind of a 30-year-old, rather. But, so I just put that together. I guess that's, it's a story. But, they get to the castle, and Pansy, has gone with them, and it turns out that she's actually the princess of this castle. And they meet with the king, and it's revealed that Gloria actually came to him saying he knew about a warrior who was strong enough to defeat Majin Buu. So that kind of changes things a little bit, because he made it sound like that the king sought out Glorio. But Glorio, of course, in that first scene with Goma and Degasu, right before it cuts to like the other stuff, turns out Glorio was actually hiding in the background. So he watched everything too, so he kind of knew. So I think he is in fact up to something. Even if you're watching it for the first time, you can kind of deduce that, hey, something's going on here with this little fella. But they basically explain the situation of what they're trying to do. And the king's like, hey, I want to see your abilities. So I want you to fight some of these soldiers. Which, of course, he wins, and he goes Super Saiyan. This scene was the first scene that kind of choked me up a little bit. I didn't, like, sob or anything like that, but it definitely touched me, because it was just really cool to see sort of this. I don't know. To me, it kind of represented what I see in Dragon Ball and what Toriyama meant to me. It kind of felt like a little sort of, like, reminder present of things. I don't know. There was something about it that just kind of touched me that was just really cool to see. And this was in the Japanese version. When I watched it the second time, I felt nothing. No, but it was cool to see. So after he proves himself, the king's like, "Yeah, you guys are cool, but so you can have a ship of ours if you want." It's like, okay, cool. And the Supreme Kai's all like, "Hey, well, we have some friends who are coming as well. So could you maybe give them a ship too? And they'll need like a Sir Warp pen code and whatnot." And then the king's like, "Yeah, no problem. Hey, Hybis." "Hey, I'm Hybis. How's it going?" He or she or whatever Hybis is kind of a loser. He's kind of funny. He's like, I was gonna get my hair done, or I just want to eat chips and masturbate. Or he doesn't masturbate, but he's actually kind of an interesting character when you look at what he has available to him. But it's like, hey, you guys get stuff ready, and you guys help Goku's friends and them, and Pansy ends up wanting to go with Goku as well. So they end up having like a little posse. And there's this like little thing that happens. It's kind of funny thinking about where Dragon Ball comes in. It's like the king is like, hey, if you defeat Goma, I'll let you have Pansy's hand in marriage, Goku. And then Goku's like, I'm actually already married with 2 kids. One, it's just kind of funny seeing seeing a child say that, but also just, just thinking about how far we've come with this story. And that's one of the reasons why I like Dragon Ball just as a franchise, because of the longevity of it. Because you get to know these characters for so long. That's sort of where having like a long running franchise can have its benefits, because every time you see a new one, it kind of feels like you're coming back and checking in on an old friend. So it was kind of cool to see that. So they board the plane, and they have all their stuff. But a plot device that's going to happen at least 3 or 4 more times happens. Guess what? The engine craps out primarily because of all the shit Pansy had, and the plane crashes. Hooray! That's totally not cliche at all. I mean, it's not really a problem if you do it like once or twice, but it felt like they did this like a million times, and it got kind of annoying. Even Stan on the podcast was like, yeah, it seemed like they were doing this a lot, so. Which, I guess I should probably, yeah, because the Daima episode is up, and I'll try to have all the links to stuff, like my Toriyama post, and then the podcast episode, and then also I'll have the Toriyama post, the Toriyama episode of the podcast, and then the Daima episode of the podcast. If you guys want to kind of listen to that stuff and listen to a more sort of like group discussion of Daima that happened, like I think like the week it finished. For me living in North America, the States, Dragon Ball DAIMA premiered on. I watched it on Crunchyroll. It was on I think Hulu and Netflix, so it was also kind of a big thing for Crunchyroll too, I think, as a company, because like even though Dragon Ball is owned by Crunchyroll now, at least the English version is, they put it on everything. Like I mentioned Stan as well. I think he watched on Netflix. Troy used Crunchyroll, my Crunchyroll, and then I watched it on Crunchyroll. It came out on Friday nights, I believe. I was doing this thing too where I would watch it every Friday. I didn't do what I did with Super, where it would come out technically that Saturday night, but I wanted to watch it Sunday night because that was my Monday was my day off, and I wanted to kind of do Dragon Ball and sort of like just wind down with Dragon Ball. Like this time, no, I watched it as soon as it came out after I got off of work, and I did this thing to where like I'm gonna have a big ass feast. I probably gained a lot of weight, and I'm trying to get that weight off still, but that's neither here or there. But yeah, I made it a whole thing, and when the next thing starts up, I may do the same. But yeah, the plane crash lands, and they have to find another plan. And one of my favorite scenes comes in where Goku, he has his like, "Hey, Giorgio," and then Gloria's like, "It's Glorio." I think you're doing that on purpose. No, I'm not. Okay, say it right then. Glorio. Glorio. All right, good enough. So, what do you need? Yeah, I gotta take a dump. That was probably my favorite scene. I have a screenshot of that. I took a bunch of screenshots, and I say screenshots, but I was literally like taking my phone and like taking a picture of the of my computer screen because I watched it on my laptop. It wasn't until the final episode where I decided to watch it on my TV using my Switch. I was gonna try and be cool, but like, well, I'm gonna try to watch it on my PS3. I don't know why I didn't just go upstairs and watch it on my PS4. I think it's because the TV down here is nicer. I'm recording this in my basement. You can probably hear the echo because my setup is not in the same situation that it used to be, but I'm recording in the same room that I would have recorded it if we hadn't done the renovation. But it was kind of funny hearing Goku say that, as well as him taking a dump, and also the fact that in the Super timeline, even after all this time has passed, Goku's poop is somewhere in the demon realm. Either that or an animal has eaten it, and that animal is really fucking strong. I might need to do a fan fiction about that. Maybe I'll do that after the Totally Spies thing. Do a thing where a demon version of Bear with Sword ate Goku's poop and became like super powerful. So he's basically like a Super Saiyan demon bear thing. I don't know. No one steal that. That's my idea. Or I don't care about that. But that was still kind of funny. But and some I keep calling them soldiers. I'm gonna be honest. When I was writing these notes, I kind of forgot that they were called the gendarmerie. It wasn't until I played the Kakarot DS, it's like, oh, that's what they're called. And I think later down, it'll probably switch to the gendarmerie. I think is in parentheses. So apparently, when I was writing these notes, I knew in fact that they were called the gendarmerie, but for whatever reason, I'm like, no, they're not. But so they stopped that while Goku's taking a poopy. So it kind of worked out that Goku had the call of nature while the gendarmerie had the call to action. But they also reveal at this point, that Supreme Kai is what's known as a Glend, because we've already established that he and Piccolo are descended technically from the demon, or at least their races. But yeah, they reveal that that Supreme Kai is a Glend, and that they're technically from like onion tree things, and they're technically gender neutral, very clearly, as we can see with Degasu and Supreme Kai and Arinsu, and I guess technically Supreme Kai of Time from Xenoverse, and the other Supreme Kai that we see in Super, and even in Z, where they had like the different ones from the same universe. They all end up taking on either masculine or feminine traits. So I don't really know kind of what that means, and I don't know if it really even matters. He also makes it sound like the trees that the Glens are made from are like all dead, so like the Glens are going to become kind of extinct. So that's kind of a shame. But they decide to camp out in a cave. So, but while they're all sleeping at nighttime, Glorio, he's up and about, but he's using his Demon Realm cell phone, his Android phone, to like call someone. And it seems to be Dr. Arinsu, and she says things are going to plan. Nani? What's he planning? Why is he being a pee-pee head? He's not really being a pee-pee head. It's kind of a little vague as to what he's doing, but the next day, everyone's woken up by a huge-ass Minotaur. He's like, I'm going to eat you guys. But Goku's like, he's unfazed. And even the Minotaur's like, wait, why are you not unfazed? During my second viewing, I don't know why I didn't notice this before, but it was kind of cool seeing like Kid Goku not be afraid of like a giant Minotaur, which I mean, like he would never have been afraid of a giant monster, even as in the Dragon Ball days, I don't think. But it was just kind of, you could just kind of tell that it was less about, hey, this guy, I can take this guy. It was more like, yeah, I can definitely take this guy, kind of thing. Now Glorio, he wants to fight this Minotaur guy, but then Goku's like, well, I don't know if this guy's in your league, and Goku's like, well, wait a minute, are you saying you're stronger than me? And then Goku's like, yeah, I think so. I was like, okay, well, let's fight then. So this is the Goku versus Glorio fight, and this one's kind of cool because it's like a little match thing, and even the Minotaur is like standing there and be like, sup? And like, why am I watching this? So they fight and stuff, and it's a little equal. Goku kind of has the upper hand a little bit, and during the fight, Supreme Kai, he wants to see how strong Glorio is, so he's like, hey Goku, go full on out. So Goku's like, yeah, I can do that. So Goku goes Super Saiyan, which in the Japanese version was cool, and in the dub, hearing Stephanie Nadolny give like a new modern take to her Goku was really cool, because she's doing kind of, this is actually kind of interesting when you think about it, because if you listen, because obviously her Kid Goku and her Kid Gohan voices are different. But obviously, since she's not playing Gohan anymore, she's not really going to be doing the Kid Gohan voice. However, she's doing kind of what they've been doing with Goku, or she's doing what Sean Schimmel does with, and even in like interviews, she said like, it's Kid Goku's voice, but this is basically adult Goku. So she kind of, I bet she probably was saying like, oh, this is more like GT, where like I'm playing like the adult Goku, so like the cadence is going to be a little different and stuff. But the way she did it, and I noticed this when I would kind of like check out clips in between before I even decided I was going to watch the English dub. I wasn't even really planning on that. That was kind of a new thing, because I'd watched the Buu Saga of Kai in Japanese, and then the DVDs came out when they started dubbing Super. And then when I got those DVDs, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch the whole thing. I was just watching it because I was doing like podcast shit. I'm like, I'm just going to watch the whole thing because, why not? It was only like 60-something episodes anyway, so it's not like I'm just like really stretching. And it was kind of in the background a lot of the times, I think. But I would go in between watching on my laptop and then watching on the TV. So, but anyway, when the way Stephanie Adonley seems to do, and sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, I still have not really figured out how to say her name, but when she's regular Daima Goku, she does her typical like OG Dragon Ball Daima Goku voice, or Kid Goku voice in Daima Goku. But when she goes Super Saiyan, it sounds a little bit more like Kid Gohan. I'm like, that's cool. So it was really cool to hear. It kind of gave me goosebumps just hearing that, because I just think it's really cool to sort of see a older actor come in, to come back and play this role. Like I'll go ahead and spoil a little bit with the whole, because Sparking Zero and all that. They just announced DLC for that, and one of the characters they teased was Chilled from the episode of Bardock. They may not do this, but I think it would actually be really cool if they got Linda Young to come back and do her Frieza voice for Chilled. That actually would be really cool and kind of fitting too. because for a lot of people, she wasn't the first English-speaking Frieza, but she's probably the most prolific besides Chris Ayers, and it'd be kind of cool to have her come back and play, technically speaking, the oldest member of Frieza's race. That would actually be kind of cool if they want to do that. But we will see. But yeah, Goku goes Super Saiyan, and at that point, it's kind of an easy fight. Like, there's this one scene where, like, I think Glorio's getting ready to do, like, his thunder magic or whatever. This is where they reveal he can do, like, thunder magic and whatnot. But Goku's just, like, standing there, like, staring at him, like, that's so fucking badass. Like, I was rehearsing to myself. I say rehearsing. I was more talking to myself while I was waiting for my recording laptop to turn on, because it's an old-ass Windows 7 laptop. Or maybe I already said this in the recording and I'm just going crazy, but I think it's really cool sometimes. I really love seeing Goku fight new characters. Like, even though it's not canon, it'll never be canon. There's like this web comic that someone did of Goku fighting Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I just really love seeing Goku fight new characters and stuff. I almost said bad guys, but he could fight really anybody. And it's just really cool to see. And I really have a thing for characters who know how to fight but are not necessarily martial artists fight someone who is a martial artist. Like, Gloria, like, he knows how to fight, but he's more akin to a soldier or a mercenary. Like, his approach to combat is more like self-defense. And Goku's also self-defense. But in Glorio's case, he's more, from what little I understand of actual martial arts, because I don't want to sound like an asshole. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. This is just my opinion. But with Glorio, I'd wager his training and his combat experience comes from, hey, if I need to get up and close and personal, I can use these techniques to do that. And I'm more about, like, taking down with, like, one strike and kind of low-key restraining and dissipating the situation that way. Whereas Goku, it's a bit more about the sport, and it's also more about the actual art form. So, and obviously Goku is a better fighter than Glorio just by default because he's Goku. But also I feel like technically you could maybe argue that Goku's a better fighter than Glorio just from the standpoint of his approach to martial arts. Which is on a different note, like Soul Calibur, for example. With Soul Calibur 7, one thing that I kind of took notice of during Keelik's story mode, I was like, well, Keelik, he's a martial artist. And Xianghua and Maxi were treating him like a student, which is fair because he's sort of in that learning to fight stage, and that was basically what his story mode was. But Xianghua, she's an Imperial soldier, and then Maxi, he's a pirate. So it was one of those things to where, like, they both kind of have different approaches to fighting, and in some ways they are better fighters than him, but they fight more for necessity and stuff rather than actual, like, fighting, if that makes any sense. Probably not, and I'm probably completely wrong about that. But that's sort of my thought process on the whole thing. But it was just really cool to see. And then, like, after they're done, Goku's like, okay, so you want to fight now, Mr. Minotaur guy? And Minotaur's like, oh, no, I don't want to fight no more. Oh, I'm full. Sorry, guys. Ugh. God, I had a really late dinner, so I'm going to go sleep off my dinner and come back for breakfast later. That was kind of funny to see. I thought that was really cool to see. But then we get back to Bulma and them, where she fixes the ship, and it doesn't really work. It doesn't fly much. Bulma decides that because the ship needs a special kind of material to function, it's only in the demon realm. So they're thinking, okay, yeah, we might be fucked. But then Hypus comes up and is like, hey, I can pick you guys up now. So they're getting ready to join the team now. So that's pretty cool. But then we go back to the demon realm. The gendarmerie, they track down Goku in the game because of Pansy's collar, because she's a filthy Inferian. Yeah, I heard about that as well, for those of you who keep up with, the Tales series, so, we'll see. But, it was scanned earlier while Goku was taking his little doo-doo poopy poops, and, because, like I mentioned before, the gendarmerie, they came in and, like, they were searching things while Goku was taking a dookie, because they're looking for Goku at this point, so I guess that means that he was the one who kind of did all the damage when Pansy was having trouble earlier. Thank you, logic and deductive reasoning, for helping me figure out the story of the show that I watched. But yeah, so they make them land the ship, but Goku uses instant transmission to exit the plane without them knowing. So, and that's an interesting thing too. This is going to come into play later on with a specific moment that's a pretty dang cool moment that did get a little spoiled for me, like the day of, because obviously, like I said, like the episode came out, I think, right? For us, it was Friday night. For Japan, it was either Friday night or Friday morning. I think even in Japan, like the airing time of it was actually like at nighttime, because like back then with like Z and Super and Kai, even it would air on like Sunday mornings, whereas here I think it was like Saturday night. For I don't know the math. All I know is that in North America it came out on Friday, so I would watch it after work. So that means I had to go through like 8 or 9 or 10 hours of like work before I could watch my Dragon Ball. And sometimes I would get a little, impatient during slow periods, and I would check my phone real quick just to kind of look at stuff like, Jim it! But even then, like even when I wouldn't do that, I'd like to kind of check like, gaming and like toy news and video game news beforehand. And friggin' Anime News Network over here with like spoil shit. I'm like, dang it! But then also like Google, like just like suggested articles on my phone with like pull up stuff. So I did get spoiled on a couple things. But of course there were also like rumors that I would hear about as the show was coming out. So like I think everyone kind of knew what was going on. And at the end of the day, I'm pleased with everything that we got as far as these like little surprises and stuff. But yeah, so the gendarmerie, they don't find Goku and shit goes okay. One thing I want to note about the dub here, which is interesting, because this is technically because even though Dragon Ball Superhero was a Crunchyroll production, that movie got dubbed technically before the merger happened, so you could say that's a Funimation project. And you can kind of hear it a little bit in the diction of how the characters are talking. I watched this. I've been watching this woman on YouTube, Susie Liu. She's been reacting to all of Dragon Ball, and I'm at a kind of a point where I'm picking and choosing. She just got to Daima. I think she's about to wrap up with Daima at some point, but I just watched her superhero reaction, and I would hear some of the dialogue, and I'm thinking like, yeah, this kind of sounds more like what I would expect from like an actual Funimation production of Dragon Ball. Whereas here, it's kind of interesting, and I think in a way it could work if they do it properly, because they start to kind of blend terminology. And there are two instances where I noticed this. Firstly, Supreme Kai, instead of energy like they would use in the dub previously, he uses the word ki, which is the Japanese spelling of the Chinese word chi, which is what they use in the Japanese version of Dragon Ball. They're using like, it's very kind of, when you think about it, as prolific as a story as Dragon Ball is, in terms of their energy, it's not like Yu Yu Hakusho with spirit energy or what's it called? Naruto with chakra or whatever. Like, it's literally just like, yeah, we use ki and chi. And I know from my stuff, if I ever use words like that, which I don't know why I said if I ever do, because I'm going to use chi. Because I like that more sort of like kung fu sort of. That's why I like Dragon Ball. That's one of the reasons why I like Dragon Ball. Even though it's a Japanese story, there's a lot of like Chinese kung fu influence. It's well known that Toriyama was inspired by Jackie Chan movies. So it kind of speaks for itself in that regard. But yeah, so they use ki instead of energy. I think part of that might have also been because of the situation, because Glorio doesn't know what ki is. It would have been kind of weird if he said energy, because like, what's energy? Well, energy is a pretty universal word. It's like, it's not like it's like the word air, like we all breathe air. So I guess it makes sense why they would switch to ki, and I think they even have Goku say ki at one point. But that was kind of cool, because it was almost kind of like the game dubs, because the anime and the games of Dragon Ball kind of technically use a different terminology. That's why some lines and arcs that show arcs of Dragon Ball will sound different in one thing, and then when it gets introduced into the anime, it sounds different. Like, Goku's like, I'm the one you're fighting here. Then Zamasu is like, don't you dare give orders to a god, mortal. Whereas in the anime, it's you better keep your eyes on me, and then Zamasu's like, mortals do not get to tell gods what to do. It's like, it's the same line, but they kind of changed it a little bit and like kind of like refined it to make it sound a little better. So it's kind of like that, And then obviously, in Super, the dub they call Topo Top, which I still don't like, but in the games they went back to Topo or Topo. So I don't know if that's gonna change and what's going on, though. I've heard it seems to be that we might not be getting that particular thing, but anyway, they try to take Pansy away, but they're like, no! So they defend themselves and they fight, and even Supreme Kai tosses hands, so I guess I was wrong. He does in fact toss hands a little bit, even though I don't really remember him tossing hands like at all. It probably does like some like push thing. I don't remember a lot of specific details. That's why I wrote these notes too, to kind of help me remember things, but the plane does get damaged during the fight, though. But thankfully, there's a abandoned gendarmerie plane they can use, so they use that. But then, as they're about to board, Pansy's all like, "Well, what if I get caught again? Because we get caught again because of my collar and stuff. It'll still make me trackable." And then Supreme Guy, he suspects that Aranzu probably made them because he realizes they're made out of Kachin-tite, which thinking about that's also another sort of like redub, because I think they used to call it Kachin. In the original dub, but then they changed it to Kachin-tite. I guess to sort of decided to go with that. Again, this seems to be sort of like the early rumblings of like what could be a new trend for future Dragon Ball dubs. So that might have to be something we keep in mind. I don't think they'll start saying Saiyan over Saiyan. We got Kaioken over Kaioken, so who knows? But we will see. But then Supreme Kai, he uses some spell to basically take off the collar, and she's like, "Yay, thank you. I want to thank you by your real name. What's your name, Shin? No. What's your demon real name? Oh, it's Nahare." I fucking hate that shit. That's so dumb. Like, it just seemed kind of pointless to give him like an extra name like that. It's like, just because someone's from like a different place doesn't mean they have to have like some alternative name. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way. He does refer to himself as Shin, though, so we at least know that Shin is in fact his name. Which they've been calling him that in Super, because obviously we got all these other Supreme Kai, so we can't just call him Supreme Kai anymore. Goku tries to call him Nahare, but then ends up just sticking with Supreme Kai. And they board the plane again and take flight, but then they realize they need a pin code to use Sir Warp, and so Pansy calls her like froggy tech buddy, who makes them a code so they can go through Sir Warp, and then also tells her that, and then also the froggy guy or girl or whatever tells them that Hybius is back in the Dream World, Vegeta is with them, and they try to figure out if they're going to wait, but then Goku's like, I want to go ahead and fight the Tamagami. So they make it to the Tamagami, which is like this kind of like almost like the location's almost like this weird like what do you call it? Not a wasteland, but it definitely kind of, especially in the Kakarot game for the DLC, it looked very sort of like climactic. But they get to where he is, but before he fights, Goku wants to have dinner and use the potty before he fights. Very, very classic Goku, it seems. Like I was kind of alluding to before, there's a good balance between adult Goku and kid Goku. I feel like they really nailed his personality and his character here, because I know a lot of people didn't really like with Super how they kind of dumped him down pretty considerably, which looking back, I definitely kind of see that a little bit. I think it's more that they kind of exaggerated a little bit more than, I guess, dumbing down. Of course, I'd have to maybe rewatch the whole show, including Z, to sort of get a fair assessment of his character, but that's just my opinion. I didn't, of course, I like Super, so I'm not really gonna complain too much. So Goku fights the third world Tamagami, and he's like this big guy with this like little hammer guy. He's like, let's fight. And it's kind of a cool fight. Goku ends up going Super Saiyan 2. So it was kind of cool to see. In my group, this seems to be like the fan favorite episode, which was pretty baller. But it's a nice fight. And then after after Goku wins, the Tamagami makes Goku solve a riddle with the Dragon Ball and like the moving cups thing, because that's sort of the second thing. There's the first thing, which is the fight, then there's the second thing where you have to solve some sort of like riddle or problem or something. But yeah, so Goku, he solves it because it turns out that the Dragon Ball is actually behind. So it's one of those trick things, but Goku finds it, like, yeah, they get the Dragon Ball. So yay. Then Glorio calls Aransu again to let her know that they got the Dragon Ball. To add more fuel to the fire and kind of what's the word? Foreshadow to things, I guess. They show Goma and Degasu. They're watching more Dragon Ball Z because I guess they're on some sort of like Toonami binge or whatever. And they get to the part where after Vegeta tries to blow himself up to kill Majin Buu and it doesn't work, and he tries to revive himself, it turns out Aransu was actually there and she was picking up a little piece of Majin Buu. So why is she doing that? Well, in the very next scene, they show Aransu going to this witch doctor person, who it turns out I think her name's Marba, like marble. And it turns out she's actually going to have another Majin Buu character created, because it turns out that this Marba person is actually the one who created Majin Buu. Now, this is something that is kind of a weird thing. One thing I've noticed with the more hardcore Dragon Ball fans and sort of like admittedly more knowledgeable fans of Dragon Ball, there's a thing they all like to say where it seems to be it doesn't outright state that this is that, or they don't outright say this or that, which for power levels, that's pretty useful because a lot of times they'll sort of talk around it and you can kind of figure it out from there. But one of the things that they would always say is like, well, it's never outright stated that Bibbidi created Majin Buu. He just summoned Majin Buu, which, this realization doesn't really bother me that much. I don't really care. But it's one of those things to where it's like, I don't know how useful it is for us to have this backstory based on that tiny of a thread. Because without Daima, we don't really need to know who created Majin Buu, like, at all. But they wanted to do that. So it's kind of cool to know. And it's also revealed that Majin Buu, he's the reason why the Glend left the Demon Realm in the first place. So I guess he was in the Demon Realm at first. But then he decided to go to the other world. Makes you kind of wonder sort of what he was doing at this point. But who knows? I guess that kind of means, that Supreme Kai maybe had been in the Demon Realm longer. Because, it's kind of pretty heavily implied, or not even heavily implied, it's Majin Buu has been around for a while. But the witch lady uses that piece of Majin Buu that Aransu got to like conjure up some liquid stuff. And then she cooks it in a cauldron. And then she asks Aransu to drool into the pot because of some like master connection thing, which she does. And I'm like, I don't know about that. But then they also reveal, I even said in my notes, like, she does, so gross. But it's also revealed here that Aransu's plan is to use the Dragon Balls and either wish for her to be able to defeat Goma, or she's trying to become the new Demon King. What that wish ultimately entails, it's kind of vague from what I recall. But that's her ultimate plan. She wants to sort of like get a lot of power so she can defeat Goma and then take over. So this is sort of like a half filler in a way. I don't really think there's any filler. Like, from what I understand, they planned a lot with this anime. They apparently planned like several episodes in advance with the production. I suspect I have a guess as to where the production kind of caught up with itself and they had to kind of slow down a little bit. I think it actually happened near the end. And I'll kind of go into that when we get to that section, because I'm pretty sure I wrote that down. Because there's some notes that I wrote during the first watch. Most of my notes came from the second. But even then, it's been like maybe like a couple months or so since I watched it. So, but they decided to go to Goku and the game decided to go to a hotel nearby because Pansy wants to sleep in a little in a bed and bathe because she stinks. They make Goku wear a hat and hide the Dragon Ball so he can hide his human ears and stuff in the Power Pole and also the plane. But as they walk in, Goku's head gets itchy and he takes off the hat, but like, no, don't take the hat off. It's kind of funny. But some peepee heads, they saw him, so like, hey, we're gonna plan something. We're gonna take the Dragon Ball. Because I guess they heard about the Tamagami situation. So I guess it's a thing to where people are both looking for Goku because he's a criminal, but also because he's got some renown for taking down the third world Tamagami. There's this funny scene where Goku, he stinks, and Penny's like, hey, you need to take a shower. But I don't have any spare clothes. He's like, well, you can wear mine. Well, I don't want to wear girl panties. But he still ends up wearing her pajamas, so I don't know. They seem to fit him relatively well. It's definitely very non-Goku attire. I guess I don't know. Goku's Goku. You know, he probably doesn't really. He's worn a suit before, so I don't know if it really matters that much. But it's kind of funny. After he bathes and they eat dinner, they hear a lot of commotion outside, and a bird guy tries to break into the room and steal the Dragon Ball, though a Pansy had a tracker on it, so Goku's able to find it with that help, and they get the Dragon Ball, they beat him up and stuff. There's this little funny part, too, where like the thugs are like talking about what they just got, but Goku's already there, and he's like, hey, what are you guys looking for? Or what do you guys got? And he's like, oh, we got our Dragon Ball, and then they look behind him like, oh, wait, shoot, shit, Goku, So Goku beats him up with Glorio's help, and they get the Dragon Ball back. But Goku, they decide that they want Goku to sort of, or Goku volunteers to like stay up and watch the Dragon Ball while they sleep. Yeah, they wake up and then they get ready to use Sir Warp again to rendezvous with Vegeta and them, who we see have also lost their plane now. Which it was stolen because, and this is another sort of like somewhat funny scene, at least to me, because like they're getting food. And it's funny seeing like Vegeta hold like a tray with like a burger and like French fries and a Coke, and some guy bumps into him and like Vegeta's like doesn't say anything. But it was just kind of funny seeing stoked Vegeta walking with basically a Happy Meal. You know, it's just kind of funny. But basically, someone accidentally bumps into him, and they're like, "Fuck you!" And then like Vegeta stands his ground and beats him up. And so it's basically what happened to Goku earlier, except the situation's a little different. But Bulma, there's a scene where she points out Hypus's eyeball belt, which I somehow didn't notice, but that's going to come into play later on. I guess one thing this is sort of a small line that they mentioned in the first episode, talking about something called the evil third eye, or the tertian oculus. I just call it the evil third eye. Which when you have it on your head, it gives you like a lot of power and stuff. It's kind of just like a small lore thing, but, well, it comes into play later on. But apparently Degasi also has a communicator to call Aransu with, which I guess makes sense because they're brother and sister, but makes me wonder, what is this Keikaku? His plan. Keikaku means plan, by the way, for those of you who don't know. That old meme. But he does also tell Goma that Goku and them are in fact in the Demon Realm, and they have one of the Dragon Balls, so Goma proceeds to have a hissy fit. But afterwards, back to the main people, Goku and Vegeta, their teams, they basically meet up, but they basically just say hi and leave. He's like, we're going to take care of the Dragon Balls, but if you want to help us fight Goma, you can. So but then the goons who stole the plane, they come back after Goku leaves them, and Vegeta beats them up, and they get the plane back. Or they give the plane, whatever. But there is like this cool like boxing horse guy that Vegeta also beats up. Vegeta does a lot of beating up. But so we go back to Aransu, and the mixture is ready. And this is actually this is an interesting lore bit that I think is kind of interesting, though it does kind of conflict a little bit, somewhat with the. It just kind of makes you. I guess that's my one issue with the lore, and I'll go ahead and say this now, even though I probably should be saving this for a little bit later. They make it seem like the Demon Realm was sort of like the start of everything, which is going to come into play later on when they do like a giant lore dump in the middle of one of the episodes. But it turns out that this is also where the Cybermen seeds come from, and that's how it's where the Cybermen, or it's what they used to give the Majins their actual form, I guess. Yeah, they use that little seed thing, and they make a little character named Majin Ku, who basically looks like Kid Buu with a Cyberman, mod put on his body, which I used to have an OC about that back during my Dragon Ball roleplay days. But Majin Ku is probably my favorite of the Daima characters because he's a weird sort of like, he's oddly normal and kind of quirky. He's also super smart, which they'll reveal later on. But his Japanese voice actor is the legendary Tomokazu Seki, who I know as Stan from Tales of Destiny. And I always thought he would be like a perfect like alternative, male version of Goku if they ever decided to recast, or if they ever have to recast. And apparently he's been wanting to be in Dragon Ball for a really long time. They finally gave him this role. So it was kind of cool to hear him in this, though also sort of weird because, like, okay, well, who are they going to get if they ever have to replace Nozawa? Which, I don't. Hopefully that doesn't happen anytime soon because she does great here. Everyone from the Japanese version that is returning did a good job, and obviously the people who returned for the English version, they did a good job as well. But yeah. So at this point, Aransu then goes to the palace, Goma's palace, or his castle or whatever, and orders Majin Ku to fight the first World Tamagami, which is like this dude with a sword. So in between, there's this like little scene where Hybus asks Bulma to be his girlfriend, and Vegeta gets mad, and Hybus calls him out for liking boobies. It starts because Bulma likes being in kid form because her skin is soft, but Vegeta wants to be adultkin, and he also wants Bulma to be an adult as well, probably so that he won't look like a pedophile. Or doesn't really work if they're both children, but kind of like a little funny thing. Vegeta and Bulma have some. There's some interesting lore in regards to what Vegeta's into as we go into the end. But yeah, I guess Hype is maybe the more unhinged one or whatever. But anyway, that was kind of a weird tangent. Goku and the team, they make it to the second Demon Realm, which kind of basically looks like a weird like version of a Namek. It's more lush and it's green compared to the desert of the third Demon Realm. And Supreme Kai remembers living here, but he's also worried about the Krakens, which goes like, oh yeah, they're still here. And the Gendarmerie attack again, and Goku flies out to break all their plans, but then a Kraken comes in and freaking tries to eat the plane, but they escape. But Pansy, she ends up going back because it turns out they almost left the Dragon Ball. But she gets caught in a tentacle, and Goku has to save her. And it looks like they got eaten, but they didn't. And they saved the Dragon Ball. And they decide to wait for Vegeta to come to them and, stop and chill for a bit, and then Vegeta and them, they come. So, and then Majin Ku, we go back to him. He tries to fight the first World Tamagami, but he is ultimately losing. He literally gives up and he's like, I'm done, I can't win. And I was like, what? And the Japanese are just like, huh? But there's this like one instance, I think in like maybe one of the final episodes, she's like, what? Like, it's just the way she says what's really fucking funny. But she's disappointed. And she's all like, yeah, you're fine. But he's like, no, just let me, I could be more of a singer. I'm not really a good fighter and stuff. But they slowly are setting up Majin Ku to be more of a personality than a warrior. And this is going to come into play near the very end, as well as, I don't know. But Majin Ku, he's a boy. He's a pretty cool boy. But at this point, they do like this weird like lore kind of thing. It's literally like half of an episode where it's like just like a bit of a lore dump. There's one thing about Piccolo's that I don't really like that much. There's a slight inconsistency where he says that his father left the second Demon Realm long before he was born. But here's the thing about that. Again, Piccolo's what's the right word? Like, I don't want to say his title, but like who he is in comparison to who came before him is a little vague because he's both the offspring and the reincarnation of Demon King Piccolo. So technically speaking, Piccolo, as we see him, Piccolo Jr., Ma Jr., this Piccolo that we see here, his father is Demon King Piccolo. So does that mean that Demon King Piccolo came from the Demon Realm? I don't think so. But then later on, he says when he's talking to Neva, because spoiler if they meet, he mentions that his father's name was Katats, which was apparently Kami's father. Which so again, like I think it's a weird thing where it's because they merged and because Piccolo Jr. is the reincarnation of King Piccolo. It's sort of like a weird restoration kind of thing. So they're technically this. It's a thing. It could entirely be that Toriyama forgot, which I don't know. Again, like we don't know exactly how far the story was planned. I think from what I understand, I think it was more like Toriyama approved a lot of the like. I think he came up with the original idea of the story, and then like the writers would like write the script and like they would show him like he would approve it or whatever. They would always show Toriyama's like name in the credits of the opening as well, which that was kind of, and the ending has sort of like this which the opening has this weird thing with the lyrics where they spell out Toriyama's name using the kanji, and they show this. I saw this in like this video performance on like a Japanese stage where like they sing the song and they have like in the lyrics they had like Toriyama's name written out in like English. I'm like, damn, that's baller. And then in the I think it's called not Nakama. Yeah, it is called Nakama. I think the ending theme song, which kind of already sounds like a companion. Like the song itself sounds like a companion to Jaka-Jan. Apparently in the Blu-ray, again, I'm recording this before I have the Blu-ray, so I have no idea how true this is. But apparently they are playing an English version of Jaka-Jan, and Nakama already has an English version because the singer can sing in English, and that was so cool to hear her sing it, and it was really really baller. And there's some Toriyama image there because the ending shows like this like flying bird and stuff. Like they tried to tribute Toriyama as best they could here, and they did a fantastic job. But yeah, so the Piccolo stuff is kind of weird here because depending on how you see him as a character, it makes sense, but also it doesn't. Because if you see him as being like a weird fuller Kami that happens to be younger at this point or look younger at this point, then sure, Katats. And he does mention the name Katats as well, like I said, when he meets Neva. So they probably could have maybe looked at that a little differently. And maybe I'm the one that's kind of weird about it. Maybe I don't know what love is. Maybe I'm a fool. It's a Lionel Richie song. But after that, there's another like little lore dump in regards to the world around them. And this is kind of this is my biggest issue with the lore of Dragon Ball Daima, especially when you take into account Dragon Ball Super. I think it's specifically Supreme Kai's talking about there's this character that they introduced, like some Supreme Majin called like Rymus or something. It apparently created all the universe, and it kind of, my issue is that it's kind of retconning what we do with Super. I mean, yeah, I know it's never really, we don't really know what Zeno, we know Zeno is like super powerful and like the current ruler of everything and the most powerful god in all of Dragon Ball. So I guess we don't necessarily know if he created the world or what. So I guess you can maybe say a thing to where like Rymus created the world and Zeno was like, oh, I want to take over. It's like, okay, here you go. But they also show like Gowasu. So it's like, I don't know, it's a little confusing to me. And like I said, since Toriyama was involved with this, and again, I think a lot of Toriyama's notes came from lore stuff. I think that's kind of where a lot of his influence came in. I think he was doing a lot of like lore stuff here. Again, that's just my opinion. I have no idea. So don't be attacking me. The comments be like, "Oh, you're wrong." It's like I have no idea if I'm right or wrong. This is just my opinion. But yeah, I didn't really like it that much. They do kind of clarify that other rounded-eared people like the Earthlings and the Saiyans and all them are likely to just direct descendants from the inhabitants of Universe 7 itself. Was thinking about it, them drop Supreme Kai saying all this to Goku and all of them does kind of conflict a little bit, because Beer says the same thing. Like, this is Universe 7. There are other universes as well. So it's a little though thinking about it, this I just realized just now, this story actually works well for, Super's development for Goku as well, considering how many times he loses in fights and they start introducing other universes and stuff. Because Goku's pretty OP in this show. I mean, obviously it's a tough fight and everyone kind of plays their part, but Goku is still like beef boy here. And you could maybe say that like this is maybe like a last hurrah of Goku being top dog, because at this point now he's taking on something outside of his realm, but still proving on top. But once we go to different universes, he has to really challenge himself out. It makes sense in my head, and I do have my head canon on Beerus in regards to how it could connect to Daima. But it's also revealed here that Deborah's father, who also gets name dropped earlier, Abara, which the pun is supposed to be abracadabra, because technically the way you're I think most I think they intend Deborah's name to be Dabra, or I've heard people call him Dabra in like the different spaces, so that'd be Abra. And I don't remember if Crunchyroll subtitles accommodated that or not. I think they just used Deborah and Abra, and obviously it doesn't really matter. But yeah, it turns out that Abra is the one who put the limits on Sir Warp in order to avoid evasions. So, but then after the lore dump, Vegeta's all like, "Hey, I want to go fight the Tamagami now." So they go board the plan. But then Neva shows up and talks to them, and they come out to talk to Neva, and Piccolo calls him out for pretending to be senile, which he kind of was, but also he was pretty, I don't know. But ultimately, he reveals that he was going along with Goma's plan, and he tells them about his plan, and then it's also revealed that he created the Tamagami, which, reading that now, I feel like we already knew that. But Neva actually has done a lot here. But he decides he wants to go with the good guys because he can actually speak Namekian, and also because he wants to. Apparently Piccolo can't, which makes sense because he's an Earthling. He doesn't really, yeah. But Neva, he sings a little bit of Mystical Adventure. I don't recall if this was in the dub though, apparently. So I don't know if it was in the dub, but it was nice. It was cute. It's like, yay. It was nice to kind of hear. So Aransu we go to Aransu, and she goes back to the Warlock chick, and she decides, well, I want to use the rest of Majin Buu's essence to create like a big boy warrior. And it does the same thing. Like, I'm gonna bury the beam, the Cyberman bean deeper in, and a new Majin is born named Majin Buu. He looks more like regular Majin Buu, except he's like an in between of Fat Buu and Kid Buu. He's also, both him and Ku are yellow for some reason. But Majin Buu, he's hungry for chocolate and no one has any. It's kind of funny. Like, Aransu goes to Marvel like, "Hey Marvel, do you have any chocolate?" It's like, "No." And then Majin Buu's like, "Oh, go buy some. Give me some money. I'll go to the convenience store." So he rushes to the convenience store and goes get some. Chocolate. They have like this kind of cute like brothership kind of thing. So it's kind of brothership, brotherly love kind of thing. So it's kind of cute. But going back to the main peeps, Vegeta fights the Second World Tamagami. And at first the Tamagami doesn't like take him serious. He's like, "Go back to your mother's teat." And he's like, "I don't want to. I'm going to fight you now." And so they end up like duking it out and stuff. And of course, because Vegeta is my favorite character, or at least one of my favorite characters, I kind of go in between Vegeta and Tien at this point. Right now I'm feeling Tien, but Vegeta is still pretty baller. And of course, Tien's not in this at all, so it's kind of unfortunate. I don't even think he shows up in the little intro thing that they sometimes do, where it's like, the Dragon Balls, they are the mystical orbs that are the thing of the show. And they show like a group shot of the characters, including characters that we don't see, like Gohan. Which I know a lot of people are like, "Where's Gohan?" I was like, I don't want to see Gohan. I mean, it would have been cool to see Gohan at least for a little bit, but I mean, I'm kind of glad with the team that we have of Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo. I think that was probably the best sort of to go with besides also these new characters in Supreme Kai. And we get to see Piccolo do some stuff too, which is pretty baller. But yeah, anyway, back to Vegeta and the Second World Tamagami. He's got this like little lance like trident thing, and they fight, and it's kind of a neutral at first, and there's a slight this episode I think is like a two-parter, because like the episode where the fight starts, it ends right before. It ends right where it looks like a Kraken's going to come in and eat Vegeta. I'm thinking, like, can we please not track this out? Like, I was in this weird thing to where, like, nothing really felt like filler, but I was trying really hard to make sure we avoided filler. I don't know why. I don't know if I was just that invested in the story, or if I just wanted to kind of... That's one detriment to following a long-running series that I found, is that, like, with each new entry, I feel like I'm... And I did this with Sonic Frontiers as well, especially once they reveal that they got, I think Ian Flynn, the guy who writes the comics, to write the story of the game, and they started doing like lore stuff. So I'm just like, well, now I'm trying to figure out how this relates to that stuff. Yes, I did play Sonic Frontiers. No, I'm not going to review it. We already reviewed it on the podcast, so you can listen there. But thankfully, Vegeta, he's able to break through and doesn't get eaten. I'm like, good, thank you. And in fact, afterwards, because Neva actually ends up giving him like a little boost to make the fight more fun, and it's like kind of a dick move when you think about it. But Vegeta has a trump card of his own. It turns out he actually knows how to use Super Saiyan 3. So he goes Super Saiyan 3 finally. He's got like this little like cross arm things where he just like does like all these like kicks and stuff. And a lot of people don't really like his design, because instead of the hair going kind of full out in this mane, his hair just like super spikes up, almost like a weird like oversized version of Super Vegeta. I can see the distaste for it. I can also see why they would have wanted to give him that kind of hairstyle, because technically speaking, we've seen Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta before, and obviously Raging Blast, and then also in Dragon Ball Heroes. I actually have a figure of that version of Vegeta, and I also have the Dragon Star Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta as well. So I do think it looks kind of weird, but at the same time, it's just like, I'm glad that he has it, because I feel like Vegeta deserves to have all the Super Saiyan transformations. So it was cool to kind of see it in canon now. I mean, I know that like this is sort of like a weird thing, like, well, what's canon, what's not, kind of thing. But I imagine we'll probably get to, and I think it would be cool if it is canon anyway, because like it would also be kind of cool if it is kind of interesting also to kind of look at, and this is another tangent, but if you don't count Super as canon, but you just do, Dragon Ball Z, and then Daima, and then the end of Z, that's kind of a fun sort of conclusion, I think, in a weird way. This does feel like kind of like a last hurrah. Like, if Super didn't exist and it was just this, I'd be like, you know what? Not bad. And I do unfortunately think that we will eventually get to a point where Dragon Ball is done with Toriyama gone. It kind of remains to be seen. I think they're trying to plan for longevity and kind of just if the series can kind of keep going, but yeah. So Vegeta goes Super Saiyan 3. He wrecks the Tamagami, and then after that, the Tamagami makes him solve a word problem. So, which he's able to solve it. I feel like his reason behind it, because like his reason behind why the answer is 0, because the Tamagami was like, why is it 0? It's like, because like you said that Ichiro gave Kobe the snake 5 cookies, but I don't think snakes eat cookies. And I'm like, well, I don't think goats do either. I don't know. It made me think like, well, I don't know, kind of one of those things to where I would have maybe phrased that a little differently, but then again, I'm not writing this, so who knows? But it worked out in the end. They get the Dragon Ball, and they move on to the next thing. Vegeta going Super Saiyan 3, I guess, should probably mention. This was kind of a rumor. I think there were definitely some Geekdom 101 videos where they talked about that. And, it's apparently it's a bit more closer to Toriyama's original design, which for Super Saiyan 3, which sure, and they kind of work with it a little bit when Goku eventually goes Super Saiyan 3 in the show. And if you read the manga, there is sort of like this, the way Super Saiyan 3 is designed, the hair is generally shorter, but also it does kind of feel like it's more pushed out. So I kind of get it. I don't know. I get why they did it, and it is sort of a little weird looking to see Vegeta with not super spiked up hair, because that's kind of what happens with his Super Saiyan 3. He kind of more turns into Raditz. But I mean, it works out in the end, I think. You know, different characters have their looks, and I remember with Super Dragon Ball Heroes, they show a GT version of Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, but they literally just slap the Super Saiyan 4 hair on him and just make it blonde or yellow or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, that's one way to go about things, I suppose. But yeah. So we go back to the first World Tamagami and have Majin Doo fight him, which Majin Doo wins because he is much, much, much stronger than Majin Ku. But in the middle of the fight, Majin Buu like throws a hissy fit because he wants chocolate, and then Ku gives him some, and then he gets like more power. I'm wondering, looking back, because I wrote this in my notes too. I'm wondering if they were trying to explain why Majin Buu likes candy, because I know some stories will do that to where they'll try to do association for lore stuff. I don't know how important it is to know why Majin Buu likes candy. I'm not really one of those watchers where I have to know like every little detail and why things have to like make every little sense, and that I need to have like a whole like section explaining something. Because I think a good writer will use small details to explain things if you're paying attention. And, some stuff, quite frankly, is just not that important to explain. But also, that does kind of come into play a little bit later on near the end. But, yeah, so after Doo wins, First World Tamagami makes him solve a math problem, which he kind of struggles because he's not really that smart. But Majin Ku was paying attention, and he says the answer and tells Majin Doo, and Majin Doo gives the answer. He's like, "That's correct." So that's another sort of like hint that Majin Ku is maybe a bit more smarter than he seems. I actually truthfully thought they were going to maybe have Majin Ku be the villain, and I thought they were going to have him fuse with or absorb Majin Doo, because thinking like, well, if I can outsmart him and absorb his power, I can become more powerful. And I thought it was going to be a thing to where the Goma and then we're gonna have to help out Goku and them to beat the bad guy or something. But it actually I think worked out better how it turned out. Which yeah, but then the next episode, which is apparently episode 13, this one felt the most like filler because it's another thing where the ship crashes again and they're in like this like forest thing and they're trying to kind of fix the ship and figure stuff out. This was definitely a very filler episode, and they're in like a giant world. They're trying to avoid like giant things. In fact, I'm pretty sure Kakarot skipped this section entirely, which I'm glad. The only thing worth noting, I think, is that like Bulma, when talking about the capsules, she calls them a hoi poi capsule, which I think is the Japanese term for the little capsules from the Capsule Corporation. It's like, okay, that's cool. So that's another sort of like instance of like the dub and sub kind of merging terminology, which is interesting. But there's more lore about the Majin Stones being a sun or something. I'm like, what? It's like I don't care about that, but this kind of goes along. At this point, the lore is starting to get a little overbearing because it's like, new location or not, I don't need to know all this, because for one thing, I think we all know that at some point we're going to go back to the Demon Realm, and either one of the games or in a movie. I remember I had a dream like years ago of like Goku and the gang, and I remember Goten in particular. It was either Goten or Gohan. It was specifically I think the GT versions too, probably because at the time that was new. But they go to like this. They go to like this like weird like demonic world that's like a volcano-y world. So it's definitely been on my mind, and I know it's been on other people's minds as well. When I first saw Deborah, I was never thinking like, oh, what's the Demon Realm? I wonder if they're. I mean, I thought that for like a little bit, but then it's like, okay, back to what I'm looking at now, kind of thing. So, they have to in this episode they have to avoid, a giant ogre guy and his doggy, some like giant school kid. And they have to avoid his falling school supplies. He takes a break to like eat like a thing of jerky and whatnot. It was kind of a little mini adventure on its own, and watching it a second time wasn't terrible. I think part of the issue why it was annoying was because since I was watching it week to week and not binging it, having to wait a whole week after watching what from my perspective was a nonsense episode, largely, I'm just like, okay. The only thing that really carries over to my recollection, and also based on my notes, is that they have King Goma. I say they, but I mean like King Goma decides that he wants to shut down Sir Warp, which prevents them all from going into the final demon realm, the first world demon realm. So that becomes a bit of a problem. And also they introduced a new little tiny cast of characters called the Gendarmerie Force, which they're basically a Diet Ginyu Force. They all largely look the same too. Like they're not even really that interesting. It's not like the Ginyu Force where they at least look different. There's a funny scene where they meet Do and Ku at like a convenience store, and the Gendarmerie Force thinks that Do and Ku are kids, which they basically are because they were born like that day. And so they try to buy them a bunch of snacks so they can't afford it, but they can't afford it, so they're like, you can just have some chocolate. Which is kind of funny. I've actually been getting into Japanese snacks lately. It's literally called Japanese Snacks Republic. I've been buying a lot of stuff. I've got some kabuki age, these like rice cracker things, which those things are delicious. And then I've got like some, I had a ramen thing that I ate already, some Japanese hard candy that I was kind of indifferent to. I also got Pocari Sweat, so yeah, I guess I'm turning into one of those guys now. And these strawberry custard cheesecakes, which are tasty. But that's neither here or there, is it? No, it is not. But just a little funny scene. But we get to the gate, and they realize they're stuck, but then Neva's like, well, I can just use my magic to open the gate from the second realm to the first. And it turns out that Neva was actually the one who put the barriers up between the three realms in order to avoid chaos going on in between the different realms, because they were like bullying each other and stuff. Kind of alluding back to why Piccolo, or why the Namekians from the Demon Realm decided to migrate outside of the Demon Realm, I think. So it was kind of interesting that there was that much precaution over the different realms. But they get to the first Demon Realm, and Goma figures out, so he orders an all-out attack. And this is sort of another cool moment. It comes up a little bit later on. But it's like a little tiny little mini war, because it's basically just like I think in the game there's like a little bit of, or the game in Kakarot there's like a little bit of a outside area you can go to, but you're basically just in the castle town area, and then you fight Goma and all of them. But as Goma and Degasu are like taking stock of everything and the good guys invading, they see Hybis. And they recognize his belt, because it turns out that the evil third eye has been with Hybis the entire time on his friggin' belt. So, yeah, it turns out that wasn't Troy called it a MacGuffin, talking about it on the podcast. So, I kind of completely ignored it when I first watched it. So I'm like, oh, yeah. I guess that's kind of the perks of being sort of like a mindless watcher, where you just kind of enjoy the fun. Where... we can kind of just enjoy it for what it is. But they also revealed that it turns out that Deborah was actually the one who caused the evil eye to go missing, because what he did was he hired a henchman to steal it and then hide it, and then like he basically usurped his father and became the new Demon King. I don't know if that means he killed him or what. During the lore of, specifically when they're talking about the evil eye and stuff, they use a different narrator. I don't know why. I don't know if there's really any reason to it. The narrator that they use for the dub and the Japanese version is the typical narrator. They've been using ever since like that midpoint. For the English version, ever since Kai, and then for the Japanese version, I think it was like the midpoint of Super, where they decide to change things up. But what basically happens is that Degasu basically hires some like, hot Babelian, some Demon Realm Clover, but some like chick to seduce Hybis into giving her the belt. And he's like, I'll give you if you give me the belt, I'll give you a kiss. Like, I don't want a kiss. I'll take your hat though. And you want my hat? Like, give me your hat. Like, okay. It was kind of funny. It's apparently her favorite hat. It's a big ass hat. But he's like, I got this sick ass hat. Yeah, this next, especially the sub. I don't think it happened in the dub, but the scene where Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo, and I think even Glorio and Pansy, and maybe even Supreme Kai are all like shooting energy blasts, trying to fight against the gendarmerie, and then like as things get a little hairy, Pansy's dad, the king, I think his name's King Kadan, if I recall. He comes down, he starts helping too, and it was just kind of cool seeing everyone kind of work together and stuff. Like, again, like if we do the way I would do Black Frieza, if that's supposed to be the final arc of Dragon Ball, get everyone involved. Everyone on Earth needs to get involved, even if they all suck. I want Chaozu to try and fight Frieza because it's important. You need to have all hands on deck. That's kind of why I liked the Omega Shenron stuff from GT, because they did in fact have everyone who was there at the time, besides like Yamcha and Tien and Krillin and like 18 and 17. They had like all like the people connected to the Saiyans and then Majub, but they didn't have the others. So it's like, you know what, fair enough. Have like the fan favorites. But if it were me, everybody needs to be involved. So, and then if you want to go even further, have everyone everywhere be involved, which, you know, that more depends on the story, I guess. But yeah, that section kind of got me. That was the second part that kind of got me. There is one. The third one came in during the dub, during like a quick initial viewing, but we'll get to that when we get to it, because it comes with a pretty baller moment for our boy Goku. But after the battle, the gang, they escape, and they decide to rescue Dende before they get the last Dragon Ball, but they're stopped by the gendarmerie force, but they get pretty beaten up pretty handily by Vegeta. And the Kakarot DLC is a legit boss fight, so if you don't know how to play the game like I do, it's going to take, and I mean that like I don't know how to play the game, it's going to take longer than like a few seconds, so I technically broke the canon because I took too long, but it was still kind of cool. And the song they played was actually kind of cool as well, so I don't know, maybe I'll look that up later. But after that, they go inside, you know, the castle area, and Goku uses like the sensing part of instant transmission to try to find Dende's key. And I think this is where he mentions key specifically. So it's kind of cool to hear that again. Which, you know, again, I'm not against that. You know, restoring martial arts terms, I'm cool with. Plus, at this point, it's like the whole Son Goku thing. Like at this point, most people know that Goku's full name is Son Goku. I think at this point, I don't think it's necessarily wrong to be all like, oh, no one knows his full name is Son Goku. So it's like, no, we know now. Especially with Crunchyroll kind of helming it now. I imagine they're probably going to consider making some changes. So that's my approach to the whole thing. But they find him, and it turns out that Degasu is trying to kidnap him and fly away, because it turns out he also wants to become the new Demon King. So things are a little crazy with like 3 different people trying to be king. So, and Pansy tries to stop him, but it doesn't work, because he has like a little blaster. He's like, you know, if you move closer, I'll shoot Dende. If you move that girl, I'm going to shoot you instead. But then Glorio, he's able to save the day by throwing Hybus's new hat from his waifu at Degasu, and like knocks him out and stuff. Or like he doesn't like actually knock him out, but he like sort of he's able to help get Dende free, because Pansy then catches him, and like Piccolo does like a cool like neck chop and knock him out, and he gets restrained and taken away by some of Pansy's dad's soldiers. And then Goma's all like shiz, and then the lady comes back and gives him the third eye, which he then takes off the belt. He tells her, she's like, hey, I was gonna get a reward. I was like, okay, go to the treasure room and get whatever you want. Wait, before can you put this eye on me? So she has him help him like put the eye on, gets the thing put on his head, and now he's going big buff daddy mama. He's a buff boy. But going back to Goku and them, they get to the First World Tamagami, and they see that the Dragon Ball is missing. That's where Dr. Aransu and then Majin Ku and Do show up, and they're like, hey, We're the ones who have the Dragon Balls. I want to be Demon King. So, and it turns out like like she doesn't really want to make things like peaceful either. So here's what I'm thinking, guys. You pick one of your fighters, and then I'll pick a fighter of mine, and we'll fight and wager for the Dragon Balls. If I win, I get your 2 Dragon Balls. If you win, you get my 1. And even Pickle's like, that's not really a fair trade. Like, how's it a fair trade when you have different numbers? But it's basically Goku versus Do. But it seems to be kind of close, and I wager Goku probably would have won because he's Goku. But the fight is cut off early because Goma comes in. And he's using his evil third eye powers to be like uber powerful. And he's like, I want to fight you guys now. And he makes like this giant like arena place, and everyone kind of runs in to go fight. It starts off with just Goku, Vegeta, Piccolo, Glorio, or Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo. But then Glorio and I think Pansy goes to help, and of course Bulma's there as well. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned that, but she is there. Of course, you would have had to be able to put 2 and 2 together because I mentioned the whole thing about her boobies earlier. It's late. It's like almost 4 a.m. when I'm recording this. But anyway. And then Iron Su's are like, well, Ku and Du should probably help too. And then even the First World Tamagami goes to help as well. Never like kind of nudges him over. And it's kind of cool. So like it's like a little mini war between Goma. And it's pretty cool. And it looks like things are getting bad. But then Goku's like, well, I got to go Super Saiyan 3. So he decides to go Super Saiyan 3. And here, he does have his regular sort of Super Saiyan 3 hair. He kind of looks more like how he did when Goku would go Super Saiyan 3 and GT as a kid. But they do have a section where like they show the hair and it kind of spikes forward a little bit. So I think that's kind of what they're trying to go. I think they're trying to say like, hey, this is why we had Vegeta's hair spike up like that when he went Super Saiyan 3. Because Goku's is technically doing the same thing. It's just that his hair shape is different. Though thinking about it, they could have easily had his hair be even more spiky if they really wanted to. I guess it was one of those things where like, well, we want to respect the design that we have of the character at this point. But Majin Buu and the First World Tamagami, they help. Majin Buu kind of has like this interesting thing where he eats a big cookie and then he gets his own like Super Saiyan 3 form. And he's kind of doing some good damage at first, but then he runs out of juice and gets tired. He even gets like the Super Saiyan 3 hair, which makes me think about what they're planning because again, spoilers, they've already announced Xenoverse 3, so that's, assuming they add the Majin back in the game as a playable race, they'll probably pull from there, or they should. I know right now the big thing is like, oh, you come back as Majin, as Kid Buu, and you kind of do this thing, which like, I don't know, I really do hope they add more than just like 1 or 2 transformations for all the non-Saiyans. Because, they deserve to have their own forms too, and yeah, the humans have Kaioken. Well, everyone has Kaioken, and I don't know, it's one of those. Because it's one of those things where, like, yeah, everyone else has Kaioken, and then, like, Potential Unleashed or whatever, or Elder Kai Unlock ability or whatever you call it. But then the Super Saiyans have, like, 15 different versions of Super Saiyan. But it starts off okay with Goku kind of doing okay with Super Saiyan 3, but it's not enough, and Goma pretty much beats him up and knocks him down. But then but then a Neva comes up and like does some like magic energy thing and makes like this cool scene where Goku becomes Super Saiyan 4. Yep, Super Saiyan 4 is back. And this is the other thing that was kind of spoiled for me. It was Majin Buu, Majin Buu, and then Super Saiyan 4 that were spoiled for me. I don't count Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta because I heard the rumors. And I had heard some rumblings about Goku getting a new form, so I kind of knew. I think a lot of people were suspecting that there was either going to be like a new fusion or they were going to bring Vegito, and which that would have been kind of interesting. But no, it's Super Saiyan 4, and it looks relatively similar to like GT Super Saiyan 4, except the hair's red to kind of match the fur, and the physique is generally larger. His arms are larger, and then also his like forearms have like the hair kind of like stopped at a certain point, which I think looks kind of weird. I like the GT version where like the hair goes all the way down to the wrists. I think that's cool, but that's just my opinion. But in here it's different too because instead of adult Super Saiyan 4, it's kid. So it's even Kid Daima Goku being Super Saiyan 4. And this is the the third thing that kind of choked me up a little bit when I was watching, and this happened in the dub. And the reason why is because, like I said before, I think it's really cool to hear someone come back to a project and either show their own experience, like if they were doing something else and then they come back and they come back with that new experience, or they come back after not doing it and they learn quickly the new standard. And apparently Sean Schimmel had to kind of correct Stephanie on this a little bit, because apparently, like, hey, you know, I don't know if it was for this or if it was for Super Saiyan, but like he had to be like, hey, like the way we do it for Super Saiyan Goku now is that when he goes Super Saiyan, his voice changes, or my voice changes. So I don't know if that, whatever. But when I heard the English dub version of Super Saiyan 4 Daima Goku, like as a kid, I'm like, whoa, like that sounded so cool, because it was a new voice entirely. Like it was like a really gruff, like teen Gohan, and it's like, that sounds so cool. It gave me goosebumps, because it's like, it was just really cool, and like, I'm like, dang, this is just like beautiful. And there's even a part where he does a Kamehameha, and the way she does it kind of matches how Sean Schimmel does his Kamehameha. I'm like, that's really cool. That's a really strong, that shows really strong acting chops to be able to match someone's way of talking when your voice is like not even on the same register, which, I mean, sure, that's a bit easier than it sounds, but you know, it can be kind of hard to pull off stuff like that. I mean, a lot of my voiceover stuff, when I've had to, because a lot of my big roles in the Sims community have been like recasts, and a lot of times I just kind of do my own thing. I remember when I was auditioning for one, I was like, hey, can you try to match the original? I tried to be like, yeah, why don't you do what you were doing before? Because I'm not good enough at matching voices like that. But I can kind of do okay. But anyway, it was really cool to hear her do that, and it was awesome. Now, they don't outright call it Super Saiyan 4, but there's some clues. They call it Super Saiyan 4 at the end, but there's like a clue, because Goma ends up kind of getting the upper hand. He uses like some magic orb thing to like make Goku revert back to his base form, and the way they do it is that they kind of have him go backwards. So it's Super Saiyan 4, then Super Saiyan 3, Super Saiyan 2, then Super Saiyan 1, then base form. So it's like, I think that was them trying to say like, hey, yes, this is Super Saiyan 4, or they were trying to hint that it was Super Saiyan 4. I don't know if that was just because it looks different, but basically, you know, and of course, like, they think it's going well before all this, but like, you know, Goma used the evil eye to become even more swole. I'm sure those of you who played Sparking Zero see that like there's like buff evil eye Goma, but then there's also like giant evil eye Goma. So, you know, things get kind of hairy at that point. Everyone's kind of struggling, and they're trying, and they're all getting beaten up and stuff. And you know, Aransu, she calls Gloria on the thing like, hey, come here and bring the Dragon Balls. Her plan is to have Gloria use the Dragon Balls to like make herself super powerful so she can win. And it turns out that Gloria actually learned Namekian to make the wish. So he gets the Dragon Balls. Hybus just basically gives them the Dragon Balls, and so they have the 3 Dragon Balls, and like they summon Shenron and stuff, or they summon Shenron or whatever. But and it's kind of cool because he looks like a red Purunga. I wonder if that was sort of like a nod to a GT, because I remember for the Black Star Dragon Balls, it was a red Shenron. So that was kind of cool to see. And Gloria, he's hesitant to make the wish because the friendship he made with everybody. Which I felt like this was, I think, probably one of the weaker moments. And I think this is maybe sort of this is sort of a sign that they didn't really plan this far ahead. When in the initial production, at this point, they were actually treating it more like a weekly thing, and they were having to kind of catch up a little bit because it felt a little too like anime cliche for one thing, and also I kind of get it, that because I think they were trying to kind of show, and I'm sure I'm sort of like misquoting my entire argument during the podcast, and Stan actually explained it relatively well. I think Troy brought it up as well, but I'm going kind of off of my own memory at this point. But thinking about the Goku and Glorio fight, I think that was maybe sort of like their hint that like maybe he, I don't know, didn't have his worth or whatever. But I don't know, this little hesitation in him sort of like being sort of like conflicted, I didn't really buy entirely that well. I'm okay with it because it ultimately leads to him wishing for Goku and the gang to come back into adults, so they all become adults again. which helps them out because their full power is in check, which is pretty cool. And of course, you know, uh, Arinsu is kind of mad about that. He's like, "You're fired." He's like, "Thank you for everything." He's like, "Why'd you do it?" Like, I just, and I almost wonder if like him not saying anything is them trying to be like, "Yeah, we don't know why he did that. He just did it." Um, but during the episode beforehand where he summons Shenron, they're like, "No, Glorio, you were evil the entire time." And of course, no. And then when he goes back trying to kind of like make things right, it's like, "Glorio, you did good." That's another kind of weird thing. Like, why would you think that like I don't know why he would be concerned of whether or not they like him or not when he stole the Dragon Balls to give them what they wanted. So I don't know. But I like this too because I was a bit worried that we wouldn't get to see the adult versions of them until like the ass end. I mean, it was like I think like the last 2 episodes or maybe the final episode. For a brief moment, they have Vegeta and Piccolo's Daima versions voice the adult versions for like a brief moment, and it sounds like they're kind of trying to do sort of like an in-between. And I don't know if this is sort of a thing. Chris Sabat, the voice of Vegeta and Piccolo, did talk about in an interview. He didn't outright say he was going to retire, and that was actually kind of like a big thing to where it's like, no, he's not actually retiring, but he made it sound like he would understand if they wanted to kind of like bring in someone younger who can do these things a little bit easier. Because he said like, it's kind of harder for him to like scream that much. But either way, it was kind of interesting to hear sort of like this like different version because Vegeta in particular kind of sounds like how most people I think probably want Vegeta to sound. Chris Sabat really brought in the sort of like snooty sort of princely voice lately, especially with like Super. Whereas I think his Daima actor is Paul Castro Jr. I think it was I forget the name of the actor, but it was someone because Kid Vegeta was in the Barrock DLC for Kakarot, and there's a section where you play as him, and I think they kind of they get some kind of like a similar thing, but it's a different actor. But this Paul Castro Jr. I think did a good job here. And again, I have to like listen back to see like how he sounded with the lower thing. But for a brief second, it sounded like they were trying to do like an in between thing. So that was kind of interesting to hear. So we'll have to see kind of where things go. But the sad truth is that even at some point, if Dragon Ball continues, we'll eventually have to get used to the fact that the actors will all be different. We're actually kind of lucky that we haven't had a lot of like major replacements besides a handful of people. Like obviously we lost Bulma, we lost King Kai and the narrator for the Japanese side at least, and we've lost a number of other people as well. As far as death goes, like Mr. Satan in particular, we've lost like twice. So, and Master Roshi we lost pretty early on, but thankfully we've had a consistent replacement. And then Tien, he kind of went sort of all over the place, but that's a kind of a tangent. But yeah, so Glorio joins back the good guys, and it's that one moment where Goku finally says Glorio's name. He's like, "You did good, Glorio. Like so did you. You said my name right. Like, yay." At this point, the fight with adult Goku and Vegeta and them doesn't really seem like an uphill battle anymore. They still struggle because they haven't really healed. It's just that they're just generally stronger and they're more used to their adult bodies. Vegeta does go Super Saiyan 3 again. Which, honestly, I think part of the reason why they did this was for the eye candy because they knew that they were going to want to say, like, well, what are they going to look like as adults when they go Super Saiyan 3 and 4? It's like, well, here you go. And at this point, they recognize that Goma's power is essentially unlimited because of the third evil eye. So they're trying to kind of figure things out. And Aransu comes in like, hey, I have a plan. She ends up finding this. They end up coming with a plan where because she finds this book that Ku uses like his friggin' magic fingers to like scroll through and find a specific passage on like the evil third eye to where like the way you get it to get off of someone's eyes, you have to smack them on the back of the neck 3 times. So they're thinking like, okay, Goku and Vegeta, I guess, will sort of distract him while Piccolo comes in and like attacks from behind. But there's Vegeta, Goku's thing that like, well, Vegeta doesn't have a lot of energy in the tank, but Goku thinks he probably has a little bit more. I guess just on the grounds of like he's had a breather, kind of chill, and Vegeta's currently fighting. But Vegeta doesn't really want to stop fighting, and so Bulma steps in. And this is kind of where the weird sort of like sexual thing or Vegeta's apparent kinks come into play, because he's like, Vegeta, get down here right now. No, I don't want to. If you don't get down here right now, I'll never take another bath with you. And it's like, oh. And he immediately flies like, I'm done fighting. So apparently he and Bulma bathe together, which, you know, I guess that's kind of cute. Bathing with your wifey wife. I wonder if they drink wine and eat strawberries while they bathe and make out and stuff. I don't know. But then Goku, he takes over and he does like this little showcase. Kind of like what he did when he went Super Saiyan 3 the first time. Where he's like, this is Super Saiyan. This is Super Saiyan 2. This is Super Saiyan 3. And then, obviously in the dub, they have him go, and this is to go even further beyond. I kind of like the Japanese version a little bit better, because he's like, and just a little extra. Because I just kind of like the... change here, you know? I get why they did, you know, this is to go even further beyond. That was very clearly... I doubt that was in the script. I mean, it might have been, but it was a nice callback to that, you know, original dub. Like, this is to go even further beyond. You know, when we went Super Saiyan 3. But now, Goku as an adult has Super Saiyan 4. And they had this thing to where he throws his shirt off, which, this is going to sound really weird, but I actually kind of, one, it was a Toriyama decision, which is interesting, but also I kind of like how instead of ripping it off, he just like grabs the lapel or the placket or whatever the right word is for his gi top and just like throws it off. I don't know if it's entirely necessary to explain why Super Saiyan 4 Goku is shirtless, but hey, you know, that's just, I don't know, there's kind of going back to how I feel that like you don't have to explain everything, but you know, it's something. But anyway, so Goku goes Super Saiyan 4 and it's pretty baller. And this is going to sound a little strange, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. I think Sean Schimmel's screams when he was going Super Saiyan and Super Saiyan 2 and all that for the Super Saiyan 4 transformations, I think this is actually some of his best screams because he sounded a bit more controlled. You know, lately he's been real big on like the really heavy screams and like just really using his lungs, and like a lot of people just really love how cool he sounds when he screams. Like there's this one like meme video of like what if Goku was in the MCU, and it's during the, you know, Endgame fight with Thanos and all that, and you can just hear like a fade in of Sean Schemmel screaming coming in. I was like, that's badass. But so I'm all for that. My favorite scream of Sean Schemmel's is still from the first Cooler movie, to where it's sort of like an in-between of like his early, you know, Goku screams when he's still learning about voice acting, and then like when he kind of goes into like that real throaty, like, you know, intense scream later on. It was just kind of cool. You know, it was a really cool sounding scream. But here he sounded really, really cool with this scream because he sounded a bit more controlled, and I think it showed that he knows kind of how to rein it in a little bit, in my opinion, which I think that's really important to do. Talking about my experience as well, some of you might know that I'm in a series called Soup. I play Gunther. It's another Sim series, and the direction I was given for that project was she wanted it to be more like the animated series Home Movies, where like it's a bit more dry and it's not like super emotive with the acting, and that's something I'm having to kind of learn how to do. And so I think from an acting standpoint, it takes a lot of skill to be able to learn how to tone down. You know, it's one thing to, it's sure from one standpoint it can be kind of hard to go big sometimes, and sometimes that's definitely necessary. But I think it's almost more impressive to me if you know how to kind of tone it down. Because sometimes, you know, going big is not the decision. It's called overacting for a reason. But that's just my take on it. I'm not a professional actor. I just have, at this point, I'm just more of a hobbyist voice actor. So it's like, anything that I say about the craft, I don't think should be, you really shouldn't take anything I say seriously. this is just my opinion. I'm a writer and an actor, so I feel like I do have some valid opinions, but again, they are just opinions. So just if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. If you disagree with this entire review and you think that like Daima's poopy, feel free to say so in the comments, but you need to be respectful when you do so. But he did mention on Twitter, I think, that like he passed out a couple of times while doing the actual fight with King Goma, which makes sense because those yells in that episode, that final episode, where I watched it in the basement here on the big TV on my Switch, he really gave it his all like he usually does, and you know that Kamehameha was really cool, and that really iconic pose and everything. It's apparently a powerful, you know, enough Kamehameha to go through Goma's tummy, but it don't really do the trick. And Piccolo tries to get in the 3 hits, but he gets swiped away before the 3rd, and so yeah, things get a little hairy, and it's kind of seems like everything is going a little awry. And he's like boasting that everyone is, and he's like boasting and like flying everyone away. Ku also ends up flying away, but he also happens to see the book there. Or he's either holding onto the book or like he sees it, but he also happens to go near the back of Goma's head. So he grabs the book and strikes it 3 times, and it turns out he's the one to defeat Goma and get the evil eye off. And he goes back to his little twink form, his gumdrop form, and he gets restrained. And he's sentenced to 99 years into some like pot thing where Degasu is also located. The technique they use is kind of similar to the Mafuba in a weird way, according to my notes. I don't remember how it looks. I remember there's like a pot thing, like some weird like clear, almost like vial thing. But yeah, they both go in there, and the day is won. But while they're figuring things out and they're reading about like who becomes the king, it turns out that the person who defeats the previous demon lord is the one who becomes king, and they all look at Majin Ku. So Majin Ku becomes the new demon king, but he's and they even like he's a competent ruler because like he makes Arensu his vice ruler, and he makes everyone a minister. He's like, does anyone else want to be a minister? And then Hype is like, I want to be a minister. Okay, thanks. That's everyone who wants to be a minister. Then he tries to make Goku and them a minister, but Goku's like, no, we just want to go home. So, before they leave, Pansy gives Bulma a buttload of Magicite, and Dunku gives Supreme Kai a bunch of cookies and stuff. But according to my notes, I say because he's a femboy, he can't eat any. No, but he's like, I think he's like, I can't eat any of this. I think he's on a diet. He's also a blueberry muffin. He's a lot of different things. But then there's a little scene. This is sort of like the weird confirmation because Vegeta's like, what was that form? And then Vegeta goes, are you talking about Super Saiyan 4? And like, well, Boo pushed us to our limits, and I didn't think I could actually pull it off, but I've been training real good. And then it's like, well, at least you made it to Super Saiyan 3. And then he's like, no, that's not Super Saiyan 3. That's a new form. I'm going to call that one Ultra Vegeta 1. Which, kind of funny. So that they are confirming that, yes, it is Super Saiyan 4. And all the promotional material, or all the merchandise and the figures, they all say Super Saiyan 4. In fact, I just pre-ordered the SH Figure Art Super Saiyan 4 Adult Goku that they're doing. Because I think, honestly, at this point, Super Saiyan 4 is probably my favorite transformation. If I can't say Kaioken, then I'm either going to say Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken, or Super Saiyan 4. So I'm going to say Super Saiyan 4. I really hope they, in the next Xenoverse DLC, they was supposed to come out like in the summertime, so soon. Hopefully they'll add that as a transformation. Maybe they won't. They probably won't, but we will see. But yeah. So Neva ends up staying on the in the demon realm, and Dente mentions that apparently a bunch of Namekians are actually planetary nomads, which is interesting. I don't know how important that is to know. I wonder if there's a reason behind that, because like that kind of implies that there are actually more Namekians out there than that we don't know about, besides the ones that were revived during the Frieza stuff and that are put on the new Namek area. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of like with Broly and them in Super Broly, and of course also the Universe 6 stuff with Frost and Kaba, and then Caulifla and Kale, where it's like, well, there are other races, almost like a weird sort of like we're trying to naturally explain Xenoverse in canon without actually bringing up the time stuff. So, but they get to the credits. The show is basically done. It shows Goku and them waving. This is kind of funny. Like, shows Pansy using Vegeta's hand to wave, and he's like, "Oh, whatever." It's kind of funny. But they're all waving. They're playing the theme song, and the credits. They show a bunch of like the Daima people doing stuff, and the good guys being normal and having fun. There's this one little scene too where they show Goma and Dexy playing Super Nintendo inside the little vial thing. I think this is kind of fun. I think that's supposed to be a slight reference to like old art of Dragon Ball that they would do for like games and stuff, where like they showed Vegeta and Goku playing Super Nintendo and showed a Frieza and Ginyu and someone else playing Super Nintendo in like a commercial or something. But at the end, they do show an epilogue where they stop by the shop so that Goku can get more of the Medibugs, and Bulma apparently wants to get like the beauty ones. And then they show that this shopkeeper actually sells the evil eyes, and that there were actually 3 of them, but no one bought them except for one. And they're like, "What?" So, and that is sort of like a slight Toriyama ending too, to where it's like the ending is sort of like a bit more nullified than you think. A very sort of like Takashi's challenge kind of thing, or sort of like, with Commander Red wanting the Dragon Ball so he can wish to be taller, kind of thing. But yeah, so that's Daima. Like I said, the animation was great. The story overall was great. Some of the lore stuff I didn't really like too much. As I was talking about it now, I was kind of able to piece some stuff together. But again, like the stuff with like the Demon Realm gods creating everything, I didn't really jive with that. Shenron only giving 3 wishes to regulars and not being just underpowered for that section, I think was a little weird. It did also get annoying how many times the ship crashed, but then again, I get it, trope. And also, it's like, it's one of those things to where it's like, well, how else are you going to speed the story? How else are you going to get the story going? Because that's one thing, too, about writing a story with characters this powerful. Anything you throw at them needs to either be more powerful than them, which is already hard to do, or you have to sort of nerf them a little bit in a way, kind of like what they did here with them being kids, to where they had to kind of get used to their new bodies, but even then they still did relatively well. So they were still like in character. Like this felt like a pretty respectful story for Dragon Ball, I think. And the music was cool. The voice acting was great. I don't really have a lot of Diamond merch right now besides just like the few Dragon Stars they've released, and then also like I think they've done Daima Goku, Daima Vegeta, and then Adult Super Saiyan 4 Goku, and I just got the Adult Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. So hopefully they'll do some others. And I do have a Daima t-shirt as well. Did I mention that already? I don't remember. And I am waiting on the limited edition of the Blu-ray, so that's going to be kind of cool to have. But my headcanon, speaking of Super Saiyan 4 and like lore stuff, my headcanon is that like Beerus's vision or his dream of Super Saiyan God was actually sort of like a weird vision of Goku being Super Saiyan 4 fighting Goma. Maybe that Kamehameha, because I actually think that's kind of interesting, because I wager the Beerus' planet is maybe around the Demon Realm. It wouldn't surprise me if it's like adjacent to the Demon Realm. That's what I would maybe do. And that'd be kind of interesting to see how that would work. But yeah, this was a fun time, and it was definitely nice to kind of be back in the routine of like weekly Dragon Ball stuff again. I think there was a break in between like the final 2 episodes. It's because of that and the stuff I was saying about the story as to why I think they had planned up to a certain, that they weren't as far along as maybe we thought, because it seemed a little more sloppy. It was still good. I'm not saying it was bad, but the quality of the show never wavered, and like I said, and the production schedule was pretty strong on this one, and it's because of this that Toei seems to be trying to do something new with what they're doing with Dragon Ball, which we do know now they're, for better or for worse. And I say that because I don't know if it's entirely necessary, but they are doing like a slight remake of Super. Apparently they're calling it Super Kai in a way. Or maybe that's not what they're actually calling it internally, but like that seems to be. I just watched a Geekdom 101 video about it, so he can probably explain it better than I can. But they're doing like a Dragon Ball Super like retelling of Battle Gods, calling it Super Beerus, and it's apparently going to be 6 episodes. And they teased Frieza, and we already know we are in fact getting Moro, so that's going to be really cool to see. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what else they do. Apparently, the word right now is that they're apparently going to skip over Goku Black and the Tournament of Power, which is weird. And of course, since they were relatively recent, they're probably not going to do Super Broly and Superhero, which I don't know, but we're definitely getting Moro, and then Granola will probably be after, and maybe by then we'll have the next chapter, maybe Black Frieza or some other stuff, but we will see. Even though I don't really do videos that much anymore, besides letting y'all know what my writing plans are with the Totally Spies fanfic, which I'm going to try to get back to soon. I just finished the 2nd chapter of the Project One Mortal thing, and then I'm going to finish the 3rd chapter. And I actually have another story plan that I want to maybe try and tell, which that one will be a little bit different because that's not fan fiction, but it's a little side project that I've been kind of inspired to write. And then I'll get back to Totally Spies, and like I said, I want to eventually start doing the original stuff. But yeah, we Dragon Ball people are eating good because, you know, we're getting the Sparking Zero DLC as well, where they're adding in a bunch of cool stuff, and then Xenoverse 3 got announced, and I still have yet to play Gekishin Squadra, but I do have it, so I don't know, maybe if y'all want to play that, we can maybe play that. Of course, the final Xenoverse 2 DLC, so that'll be interesting to kind of see where that goes. But you know, it was cool to have this little treat, so thank you, Toriyama, if you happen to be spiritually able to hear this. But knowing one thing also I forgot to note in regards to Supreme Kai, even though I know I kind of shat on him a little bit, and I noticed this mainly in the second watch through. I think it's because it was either while I was watching it or like shortly after I was watching the dub, or around the time when I was watching the dub, that Suzy Liu person I was talking about was like in the middle of the Majin Buu stuff. She's gone through the show relatively quickly. Of course, she's doing it like daily, so. And like I said, she's in like the middle of Daima, so. But so I was reminded of how Supreme Kai was all like surprised, like, wow, these guys are something else. They're just more about fighting and stuff. But it's kind of cool to see sort of Supreme Kai trust Goku a lot more. You know, it was just kind of cool to see that. But you know, I felt like everyone was more or less in character, and it was cool to see. And I'm looking forward to being able to have the Blu-ray set. It'll be curious to see kind of what cool features they got on there, and if they have any cool interviews, or if they have like any. Like I said, they're apparently doing English versions of the song. I already know there's an English version of the ending theme because the full version of that song actually goes into the English version. So, and then Jakajan, that's all Japanese, but. You can definitely kind of tell that those 2 songs are strictly for this show. Because, you know, I feel like, you know, like I said, like I mentioned Kamen Rider Saber, and, you know, like those opening and ending theme songs, they're very much the Kamen Rider Saber songs. Like that, you're not going to really hear that on the radio or anything like that. And they're not necessarily made on their own or whatnot. But they definitely kind of feel like full songs, whereas these almost kind of feel like they're just meant to be listened to along with Daima. But they're good songs. I'm not saying they're bad songs. And like I said, the music in general is really good. So my throat's starting to hurt because I'm not used to talking this long on my own like I used to. I guess I'm also getting older. But yeah, overall, this was a good show. I would recommend it, especially if you like GT, and especially if you like Dragon Ball, the adventure stuff, and especially if you kind of want to look at, if you want to sort of pay respects to Toriyama and sort of do that. It's all entirely up to you. I guess I would give it maybe like an 8 or 9 out of 10. I mean, of course, for me, that's anything Dragon Ball gets a high rating, even Sparking Zero, which if you've listened to that review, you actually know I'm not a huge fan of it. But I think I kind of overhyped myself a little bit. And also, I've gotten to a point to where like I don't generally like things that are hard. I just finished Elden Ring to completion because I was putting off the rest of the DLC after getting to Mesmer, and then I finished the main game as well. And for a brief moment at first, I'm all like, I don't really like how hard this game is. But I kind of got back into the rhythm of it, so maybe I'm kind of learning how to play video games again. But yeah, overall, fun times. So yeah, I guess that's that. Like I said, I already mentioned my future projects, and like I said, I don't really do videos that much anymore. I want to maybe get back into Let's Plays. I do have sort of like a slight Let's Play plan that I would maybe want to do when I have like a lot more free time. Or maybe when I'm like super old and I'm retired from all my responsibilities. But we'll see. It's sort of like a loose plan. And depending on what is available at that time, it could change. I'm probably better off not telling you guys anything about it because I don't want to get your hopes up. But yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. I know it's kind of a lot. Good, like almost 3 hours. But like I said, when it comes to reviewing stuff, especially Dragon Ball stuff on my own, I'm not really good at holding back. So stuff where I'm just kind of talking about general stuff, it's a bit easier for me to sort of just, like even the Totally Spies thing, it's like, yeah, it was maybe too long than it needs to be. But I'm going to be quiet now. But yeah, thanks for watching or listening. Hope you enjoyed this on some way. I hope you maybe learned something, or if you're, go watch Daima, and I'm going to go rest my voice now. But yeah, this is Flames Are On, aka Sasuke signing out. See you later.